This regular Medicine Hat City Council meeting is called to order at 6:30 p.m. on April 17th, 2023. We'll first start with a moment for prayer or reflection. Thank you. I forgot to turn my mic off. I'll now read the city's land acknowledgement. The City of Medicine Hat acknowledges that we live and work on treaty territory. The city pays respects to all Indigenous peoples and honors their past, present, and future. We recognize and respect their cultural heritages and relationships to the land. Are there any councillor announcements today? Seeing none, we'll move on to adoption of the agenda. Are there any objections to the agenda? Any additions? Seeing none, we'll adopt the agenda as presented. Item 7 is adoption of the minutes of the regular meeting of City Council dated April 3rd, 2023. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none. I'm just sorry if we could go back up to item 6. I have a note here, item 10.1 and its subsections will be moved to public hearings and become item 9.4. Any objections to that? Seeing none, we will adopt the agenda as amended. All right, our first item is presentations, and today we have the Medicine Hat Curling Club funding request. We have Cal Hauserman, facility co-chair, Fred Weinheimer, facility co-chair, and Vicky Sojoli, sorry, my apologies, manager. And this item is for presentation and reception only. We're not going to be making a decision on this today. Over to you.
Good evening. Good evening, Your Worship and members of the Council. My name is Cal Hauserman, and I'm here representing and presenting on behalf of the Medicine Hat Curling Club. We want to thank you for this opportunity to be here tonight. I will be speaking, and Vicky and Fred are here, and we have some difficult, challenging questions. They're going to help me with answering them. The presentation that you're going to hear today was a collaborative effort by our board. I'm here doing the presentation, but various board members contributed to various sections of it. And so I'm very thankful for the board, and so I'm very appreciative of all the work they put forward. All the board members want to get curling back on track and running again. The board, the curlers, and many citizens cannot imagine a city this size not having a curling rink. So today, the presentation I'm going to share some information, and then towards the end, we'll go to look at the budget considerations, and then hopefully have something for you to deliberate about. We've had a long history of curling in Medicine Hat. Curling started 139 years ago. Our present building was brought into use in 1995. It's very well maintained and has been a hub of the community for many years. We've had a surge in curling recently, even with COVID. There's still been a great interest in it. Our juniors program is really strong. We have a new thing we're doing with the high schools and the junior highs in regards to the leagues that we want to have. We have wheelchair curling, Special Olympic curling, and literally anybody from age to 8 or 88 or even older can participate in the sport of curling. We've been actively involved in hosting events, international ones, national ones, provincial ones, and local ones. We've also been a strong supporter of the community. Through our Hat Charity Classic, we've given $117,000 to the Children's Wish Foundation. We have the Don Bennett Scholarship that goes to all 3 high schools. And one award we're particularly proud of is we received the Community Spirit Award for Compassion from the City of Medicine Hat. There was an issue where a temporary homeless day shelter was not available downtown. We were contacted about using the curling rink as a facility. The board met and they unanimously approved that motion. And that was a moment for a real pride for me because the comments the members made was, we're a part of the community, we're glad to contribute, we're so glad that we can help out with this issue. The other thing is many people don't realize the curling club is a multi-use facility. We have many other agencies and organizations that use the facility. The economic impact of our curling club has been huge. Over the last 25 years, $28 million, and this does not include provincial competitions. And so we were actually this year looking at a bid for the Scotties or the Brier, and we had met in September with an organizing committee to get started. In October, we had a brine leak, and so our priorities changed from a national event to making sure our club could run. We've been very appreciative of the city's support that they provided in the past, a low-interest loan. When we did the brine leak was on, we did a sharing of the cost of the testing. And the previous boards have engaged the city and talked to the city about our situation in the past. So how did we get here? Well, basically we had a brine leak, and then later on in the winter when it was -40, we had some pipes freeze in our ice room. And so one of the things that we're in need of three things. We need new brine pipes, we need a new ice plant, and we need the accompanying infrastructure. With the ice plant, we looked at several options and determined that the ice mats was the best option because it could be retrofitted very easily on the cement floor. It was lower cost than traditional models, and it's reusable and portable and can be installed elsewhere. The actual price was about $273,000 for that part of the project. Then we went to look at an ice mat specifications. The ice mat rationale was that we wanted increased safety features, a portable plant that could be resold or relocated. We wanted energy efficiency. And I think one of the most important things is this is the most environmentally friendly option that we could find. It has zero global warming potential and has ozone depletion potential of 0. And so it's a very leading edge kind of technology. So our ice plant acquisition, we had a process we went through. We came up with a number of final bids. With those bids, we ran them through our facilities committee. We have a refrigeration consultant, a local business that helped us with providing information. And we also contacted the city's facilities department for their evaluation. All three of those groups chose the same provider as being the best provider. And the cost for that, you're looking at about $1.1 million. Now that we have the ice mats, we have the plant, we need something to connect them. That will be the infrastructure. The infrastructure cost will be just a little over $100,000, about $104,000, to connect them and get the curling going again. So we feel we need to run for several years at our current location until a new facility is built. One of the issues is the timeline, because when we look at from order to install, it's probably going to be 7 to 9 months for the plant, because the plant has to be built. And so time is of the essence. We feel that the cost recovery with the equipment that can be reused or resale is a real advantage of our proposal. And so when we look at our actual budget amount, it's actually going to be about $1.5 million. And one of the reasons we need the money up front is in order to start the plant, the vendor needs 35% down. When it's completed, 25%, and then various draws along the process. So in summary, we feel the city could retain, we're fine with looking at options. The city wants to retain ownership of the equipment. That works for us. The financial contribution to the city will probably be significantly reduced because the money can be recouped from the sale of the equipment, or the ice plant, if there's a new facility, it could actually be moved to a new facility and used there. A grant of 50% from the Community Facility Enhancement Program would reduce the cost by half. We also have some insurance money for the brine leak, the freeze up, and the business interruption that we need to, that hasn't been finalized yet, and the club is willing to put that money towards whatever costs they are. So my closing remarks then are, as the club, we've paid for all of our own operating costs and for 66 years at no expense to taxpayers. The facility that we have had a failure and had to shut down. The City of Medicine Hat is being asked to provide the initial funds for the installation of the equipment. Action is required to ensure the curling resumes in the fall. If funding support is not provided, it's very likely curling will be unavailable in Medicine Hat for a number of years until a new facility has been built. I'd just like to thank you for this opportunity and the time to be here. And I would be willing to answer any questions or provide any clarifications that you might need.
Thank you. Not really supposed to clap in chambers, so.
Okay.
Great job. I appreciate the fact that you were very succinct in your presentation. And we have a question from Councillor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. Through the chair to Mr. Hauserman. I have 3 questions, but I'll just start, we'll go one at a time, and then with Mayor Clark's permission, I'll just continue. So in your perspective, what is a worst case scenario outcome in regards to your request to the city?
To our club. Through your worship to Councillor Knodel, the worst case scenario is that if we do not receive funding, we're going to have to close the club, and we will not have curling in the city until a new facility is built. Right now, we have finances to carry us for a little ways, but we don't have the money to stay open and have enough time to find the funds for everything.
Can you please tell us about the existing loan that you alluded to earlier? I think there's still a balance owing of some sort. And what was it for? Can you give us some context to that?
Yes, the loan was for purchasing extra equipment. We can maybe I can ask Vicky to just, do you want to just talk about what, I'll just do it, and if I miss anything, tell me I'm missing something. So we had to have the bands on the rocks redone. We had some HVAC stuff done and some other repairs around the facility. And so we used the city loan as a matching grant for the Canada 150 and Community Facility Enhancement Grant. So it was a matching, so we could double our money, basically. Did that cover it? And a new roof. And new chiller. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And last question. If you could go back in time, are there steps that you believe you could have taken as an organization to prepare for a failure of this magnitude?
Could we have prepared for this failure? The slab that we have is 65 years old, and the companies that have come to look at our building, they cannot believe the slab is that old and still hasn't failed. Most slabs actually only last a maximum of 50 years. And so from that point of view, what happened with the slab, the concrete shifted and broke some of the lines that we could not have anticipated that. And that's why we couldn't use those lines. And so the only thing, we actually, in preparation, we do regular maintenance checks, and we have a facilities committee, maintenance committee. And the other thing we did a couple years ago, we had the facility audit done by the city, and so we're using that as a guideline. The issue is our equipment in the ice plant is very old, but we've used their guideline to make some changes and adjustment to the building already. But I don't know whether we could have predicted that the concrete would shift and that we would have that brine issue.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you so much. Through the chair, I just had a quick question. You had mentioned that other organizations use the facility.
Yes.
Can you tell me who those are?
Can I tell you, pardon what?
Who those are? What other organizations?
It was on that slide.
Can we get there we go, if you want to back it up.
If you could find it.
I have to go back. I can tell you some of them right
Sure.
off the bat. There's a provincial bocce ball was there. We have the roller derby. And Vicky can fill in a few more when I get done. We have roller derby. We have shuffleboard.
One more back, I think.
Oh, yep. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, I'm not helping you. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we had the Shuffleboard, Roller City, we had the Stampede exhibition does their staging there. We have elementary and secondary schools have learned to curl. The slow pitch and the Mavericks use it for practicing. The quilt show happens there. We've had power skating there. Anything else? Bocce ball we had there. Okay, I think that's everything.
And is that a consistent usage that you're seeing from these clubs?
That's a consistent usage for most of them. The power skating, we had them for 2 or 3 years, and they didn't come back this year. But most of the other ones have all, and the Mavericks are new and the slow pitch are newer, but all of those use it consistently. Like the roller derby is there. The roller derby is there the whole time when it's open.
So the reason I asked that question, do you think that there would be some ability for them to assist with the funding of, if we fix this? If other organizations are using this, are they also part of the leasehold improvements? Are they going to help? Have we had some conversations with
We
that?
haven't had those conversations with them, no.
Okay,
That's certainly an option, though.
can I have further?
And I would say that a representative from the quilting group did contact me, say they're interested to help with fundraising. But I
Fantastic.
said, we don't know until we know what our costs are, we can't really start asking people for money. I don't think.
Agreed. Okay. I had a second question. You mentioned the ice mats are reusable and resellable.
Yes.
So who would buy our ice mats?
So we could buy used ice, we could have bought used ice mats
Okay.
if they would have been available. For us, that would have, any club that has an emergent breakdown could buy those mats. Or they're also, so the ice mat and the external plant that we have is very much like the NHL Classic. So it can be located anywhere. So one of the companies that that bid on it, one of them had used the ice mats in the Calgary Zoo for an ice rink. One of them used the ice mats in the University of Calgary, and they have an outdoor ice rink there as well. So they could actually be used in the city for an outdoor rink or something. if
That
that's
was my
possible.
question. Would we be able to make them mobile and have outdoor rinks in various neighborhoods throughout the year?
Yes, yeah, you could, yep. They just roll up and they're about like one of those big round hay bales.
Okay,
And then they connect and they connect and disconnect and you can just, so that's the reason we didn't go to sand. We went with this instead, is because with sand, the floor cannot be reused. But with these mats, they can be rolled up and then our floor can be used except for the last 10 feet of the building. But we have 120 feet of space. That's the length of the, 150, pardon me, is the length of the sheet of curling ice.
and one last follow-up question. So if you get these mats, if we fund these mats and we can put them in, the plan is to put them in the existing center, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so when does the brine leak get fixed if we're in there with ice mats?
Okay, so the brine lake, the pipes are inside the cement and leaking, so we'd have to take out the whole cement slab to fix them. So we have already removed all the brine. We actually had somebody from the city land department and some from city environmental come down. So we've removed all the brine from the lines because we wanted to do the testing first. And then so then the brine is gone. And so these new mats will be the new brine lines and they'll sit on top of the cement. And that's the other advantage of these is if there's any leak or any damage to them or anything happens, they're very easy to repair because they're not embedded in the cement.
Okay, that leaves me with one more question. Why not just use that instead of an ice plant then? Why is this just not the whole answer, just getting ice mats
You mean
for permanency?
take the slab out?
Yeah, so you're saying let's use ice mats as an interim measure. I'm asking you if it's that good. Is there a reason you wouldn't use it as a permanent measure?
Well, it's not designed for a permanent measure. They have a span of 20 years probably. And so they would last for a long time. But if you are looking at a permanent measure, then most places would go to cement over top of the brine lines. And that seems to be the standard that's used.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the chair. Thank you, Cal, for your presentation. It's nice to see you again. Just some couple quick questions, if I may. 66 years, that's some longevity for a club, isn't it, in
That is.
Medicine? 400, 500 members,
Yes.
kind of idea? When I look up into the crowd today, so it's not just for a certain age demographic. I see some young kids up there, and that's always nice to see. I just think that's great. If youth can be involved in anything, whatever sport it could be, I think that's fantastic. Where are your members curling these days?
Okay. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Hyder. This year we've been members have been curling in Brooks, Schuler, Irvin, and Redcliffe, and in Boylan a little bit too, but not as much. And so, for example, our junior team that actually just won the Mark Kennedy Classic, in Edmonton and beat the provincial champions in their age division. They've been traveling all over. I remember one of the parents said to me, he said, "Man, I can't believe the driving we had to do this year." But they've been traveling out to Schuler and to Irvine to practice. And so we've had some leagues that have operated in Schuler, in Irvine, and some have been in Redcliffe. So we've been moving, people have moved out of the community for practice. And you're right, it is an activity. I think one of the things I'm excited about is we have an excellent juniors program and good leadership in it. And I think our junior program is going to be great. And looking at bringing curling back to the high schools is probably going to really invigorate the numbers. And so I think one of the things, I see a great future. And it's really, on Saturday is a neat day to come down there. And there's no blank sheets, because the Sterling is taking place with the stick curling or the curlers that are there, the Special Olympic and the adaptive sports, the wheelchair people are there. And so it's actually a really neat thing to see everyone curling. And I actually had one of the members who is turning 90 next year said to me, says, "I'm looking forward to curling next year when I'm 90. And so that's a neat thing about the sport. It can be for people of all ages and all abilities.
Absolutely. So just one more couple things here. So you have an idea as well. You're okay if the city owned the equipment, I guess, is what I'm
Yes.
asking you. Okay.
Yes, yeah, that would be fine. Like, we would understand that, I understand that you're responsible for taxpayers' money. And you need to be accountable for that. And one way of accounting for that may be to maintain ownership of the equipment. And we're looking at options to get this to go and make it work. And so if that's has to happen, I can't actually speak on behalf of the board because I'm only one member, but knowing our board, they would be agreeable, I'm sure, to that.
Okay, thank you, Cal.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hirsch.
Thanks for the presentation, appreciate it. Just kind of interested in the one slide, and I know you were pressed for time based on our expectations, but I just wanted to see about some of the grants that you had indicated. So I do have the one slide you talk about. There's a CFIP grant, the Community Facility Enhancement Program. You indicate $771,225, and then some other grants yet to be determined. Insurance payouts yet to be determined. I'm just wondering, from the investment, what would that look like, I guess, in terms of the final net proceeds that the city would be giving to curling in order to get this put to bed? And is there an ability to get some of those funds back in terms of the efforts of the club to get some grants and that sort of thing? So maybe you can highlight a little bit of the financial plan?
Yeah, I'll just skip ahead to that slide. I think this is the one you're talking about. Is that right?
That's it, right there, yeah.
Okay, so what our thinking is, the Green and Inclusive is closed, but it will open again. And so one of the reasons we went with the most energy efficient plant was we wanted to apply for that as well. And so if that opens, we'll apply for it. Our intent is to apply for the Community Enhancement Grant as well. And so our intent is to apply for those grants. The money we have, we're basically willing to turn that over to the city. And so if the ideal situation worked out and we were able to finance all these things through grants, it's possible the city, and this is my optimistic way of looking at things, it's possible the city's cost could be next to nothing. And especially if we can resell that other equipment for half its price. One of the things with the resale of the equipment as well is that most equipment when it's sold is 20, 30, 40 years, 20 years, really old and doesn't have very much longevity. Whereas if we have a new facility, I know in the Facilities for the Future, there's planned for a new facility. If that happens in 5 to 7 years, our plant will only be 5 to 7 years old. And so it has speaking to the refrigeration engineers from these other companies, they said it would have a really high resale value and people would want to buy it. If they can buy it for half price and get 20 years or pay full price and get 30 years, they're more than likely going to somebody will want to buy it. So so we're going to apply for those grants and hopefully we'll receive them. And then whatever grant money we have, it goes towards that 1.5 million that needs to be accounted for. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I'm just gonna, I have a follow-up to that. I'll get to Councilor McGrogan next. This is a request of administration, perhaps in consultation with the curling club. If perhaps our grant expert could look into the logistics of transferring grant money and how that might be accomplished successfully, and what are some kind of logistical obstacles that we might run into in terms of transferring grant money over to a third party. City Manager Mitchell?
Through the chair, yes, we will do that, because you are right. I know some grants have to be a municipal organization applying for it, so we will get those particulars and work with the curling club on that.
Thank you. Councilor McGrogan?
Thank you, and through the chair, thanks for the presentation. I had two questions, but I think the one about the financing was covered quite well already. The second was, and again, maybe you can't speak on behalf of the club, but what is if you had an ideal future state, what would it look like?
Ideal future?
A future state past this temporary measure, what would be the club's ideal state be?
Ideal state? Through you, Your Worship, in response to Councillor McGrogan. The ideal state, I would envision, you're talking about the future and what the club in a facility?
Yeah, I mean,
So-
you know, right now you're coming saying, hey, this will get us going for the next 3 or 4 years. Is it building your own club? Is it the city running a curling sheet? How do you see the future?
My future that I would see for the curling club would be, we would have a wonderful complex that would have sheets of ice, swimming pool, whatever. And in the middle of the complex, or somewhere near the beginning, there would be a big glass wall where you could watch people curl, and people could see curling taking place. And then that would be such a great advertisement to get more people involved in the sport. But then I think we're also a part too of this larger community of activity that's taking place in this recreation center. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I was just curious,
Yep.
is this a private, do you see it as, right now the curling rink, as you know, is kind of, you go in through the little door and
Yep.
things go on in there and the public
Yeah,
don't see it. So I was just curious what the future looked like.
No, I would see an open, bright club. It's interesting, we had Bobby Ray and Sharon Clybrink were down and met with some of us as board members, and we talked about the vision, and our club is, I love, it's funny, Bobby Ray said, I love this club, I like the flavor of it, it's the tradition, he said, but it's not something that is attractive to people. And I think that's one of the things. We're kind of in a little corner down from the police station. It's not, it's a little bit off the track. It's a very warm club to come into, but it's not a new, vibrant club. And I think when you look at a new, vibrant club, that would attract more people. We also would look then at, and one of the things we're starting to do is look at, like the traditional way that curling has taken place is you join a league and start in October and curl till March. And what they're finding through research with Curling Canada is people want to look at more like 6-week leagues. And they'll go 6 weeks, and if they want another one, they'll sign up for 6 weeks. And one of the things that's happened, especially has great appeal to the millennials, because they want that shorter time. They don't have to make the whole season commitment. So there's some structural things that I would see taking place there as well, that the board would, and then those are things we're going to look at, hopefully when we have ice and can open again. Yeah.
Thank you. This is maybe not a question you can answer right now, but when you were looking into the Briar and the Scotty prior to the brine line breaking, did that look promising in the current facility?
No, it could not be conducted in the current facility. We'd have to have it at Co-op Place. And the difficulty we have there is that a requirement to have the Briar, the Scotties, you need to have another building close to it that's a briar patch. And so where they serve the alcohol and food and all the curlers come after. But one of the things that we were considering, we know of one city that did that, and they didn't have a facility close to the curling rink, and so they actually brought in tents. And Vicki was at that event, and she said you couldn't even really tell when you left the building and went to the tents, and it was warm and comfortable and everything. So of course that adds some additional expense and whatever, but it does make it possible. But when we look at all the other cities around Alberta hosting events like that, I mean, with the volunteers we have in Medicine Hat and the way people come out and support things, it would be a fun and easy thing to do sometime in the future.
Thank you very much. I don't see any further questions, so, City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you through the chair. Just for everybody's awareness and process, we understand that there's time constraints and there will be a report brought forward very quickly because we know that this ask is time sensitive, and we will keep the club in the loop. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I want to thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for everyone who came out to see your presentation today. Again, thank you for keeping it succinct, and you did a very good job of answering our questions, so much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Mayor Clark, and to the councillors. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and wish you well in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't want to make up any assumptions about what people are here for, whether they're going to be bored throughout the rest of the meeting, but I will say if you would like to leave at this point, you are more than welcome to do so. Well, try not to have hurt feelings here. All right. Really cleared the place out. We'll now move on to item 9, which is the public hearings. We have 4 public hearings today. We'll begin with item 9.1, Bylaw 4772, to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from community services and designate road right-of-way to medium-density residential district. First of all, we have an introduction by city staff, and that is Robert Sissons, Manager, Planning and Development Services.
So thank you, Your Worship. So I'm here to present a summary of Land Use Bylaw Amendment 4772, an application to rezone 1482 Fifth Avenue Southeast, 378 and 380 Kipling Street Southeast, and a portion of the lane to medium-density residential district. So our role within Planning and Development Services as the regulator is to review the application, understand any technical constraints, and provide a recommendation through the Municipal Planning Commission to City Council for a decision. So in this presentation, I'll be taking you through the site context, amendment details, the legal policy context, site photos, and administrative recommendation. So the site is located within the South Flats neighborhood. There's a setback line for slope stability at the north end of the site, and the entire site is within the flood fringe. So these items are things that would typically be addressed at a development stage. You can see in the map kind of the extent of the flood fringe in the hashed yellow, and then the dotted yellow line is the toe of slope setback line. So the consolidated site will be approximately 1 hectare in size and is comprised of the large vacant parcel, the lane, and the 2 parcels along Kipling Street as identified in the map. There's currently 1 access to the site from Kipling Street and through a small road which is named as Fifth Avenue Southeast. So Kipling Street is an arterial roadway and a main transit route. The rezoning of the subject site is required to support the Medicine Hat Community Housing Society's efforts to secure funding sources for a proposed affordable housing project. The subject sites are currently zoned as Community Services District, which does not allow for the development of residential uses, whereas the medium-density residential district allows for multiple unit residential developments as a permitted use and apartments as a discretionary use. Medium-density residential is considered the highest and best use of this site and is supported through various strategic priorities and statutory plans. The proposed rezoning has been circulated through the Technical Coordinating Committee for a preliminary review. The majority of the comments were focused more on the detailed design, which will be addressed at the development permit stage and do not affect the rezoning of the subject lands. So next steps following, should council approve the rezoning, would be a road closure of the existing lane, lot consolidation, and then development permits for any proposed development.
Thank you. I will now call the public hearing to, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry.
Sorry, okay, I wasn't quite finished, but adjacent land uses include the Medicine Hat Recovery Center to the west, Canada Post, the City of Medicine Hat Corporate Asset Management and Mixed Development to the east, Seven Persons Creek to the south, and residential to the north above the coulee wall. The map shows the various land use districts adjacent to the site. You can see the surrounding land uses are predominantly community services district and open space, with residential to the north, mixed use to the east, and a large direct control site to the south. Rezoning the site to medium density residential to accommodate a proposed affordable housing project is supported by council's strategic plan, specifically 4.3 partnerships and governance. So the approved land donation from the City of Medicine Hat to the Medicine Hat Community Housing Society specifically. 5.1 community wellness. The proposed affordable housing project is an effort to address housing insecurity in our community. And 6.8 resiliency and sustainability. So the proposed rezoning will allow for residential infill, which optimizes existing land and services. The site is located within the municipal development city center sector, and more specifically the general urban typology. The city center sector should primarily contain residential land uses with supporting non-residential land uses as well. The general urban typology is intended to support various housing types. So it should also be noted that Spencer Street, which turns into Kipling Street, is identified as an intensification corridor and is intended for that future higher density and more amenity-rich area in the surrounding neighborhood. Policies in the MDP also strongly encourage infill development to optimize the use of existing land and services. The proposed rezoning aligns with the goals, priorities, and policies of the MDP. So the purpose of the current zoning, as I mentioned earlier, is for social, nonprofit, educational, that type of uses, whereas the residential medium density is more for residential uses. The purpose of the medium density residential district is to allow for development and moderate intensification of residential neighborhoods with low to mid-rise built forms, medium densities such as multi-unit residential developments and apartments. As in previous presentations from other council meetings, I've listed the maximum building heights and densities for this particular site. Here is an aerial view of the subject site. A view looking north towards the coulee slopes. A view looking south across the site towards Kipling Street. This is the view looking west at the Medicine Hat Recovery Center on the neighboring parcel. And this is looking east at the City of Medicine Hat Corporate Asset Management buildings. This is the existing community garden on the site. The two smaller vacant parcels right up against Kipling Street. And then the lane, it's just designated on paper essentially, because that's essentially where the vegetation is. So it is recommended through the Municipal Planning Commission that City Council approve bylaw number 4772 to rezone 1485 Fifth Avenue Southeast, 378 and 380 Kipling Street Southeast, and a portion of the lane to medium-density residential district.
I'm really sorry. Please stay close by. I will now call the hearing for bylaw number 4772 to order. We'll start by asking City Clerk if there were any submissions received from the public.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. So for this particular application, the advertising and notification requirements were completed in compliance with the Municipal Government Act, and Legislative Services did a mail out to the adjacent property owners, and there were no written submissions received in response to the mail out.
So I'm now going to ask if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw to please come down to the podium, state your first and last name, and whether you'll be speaking for or against the bylaw. Council members will also have an opportunity to ask Manager Sissons any questions during the public hearing. For a second time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your first and last name and whether you'll be speaking for or against the bylaw. And for a third and final time, if there are any members of the public who wish to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium, state your first and last name, and whether you'll be speaking for or against. Go ahead.
Hello again, Madam Mayor, members of council, and members of staff. Thank you for your presentation, Manager Sissons. Just going to repeat the questions I had at the last time zoning was changed. Where is the closest grocery store and the closest bus stop to this proposed development? Because people who live in medium density or higher density may or may not want to own a car in this city.
Councillor Robbins, do you have information? I know we received a letter from Medicine Hat Community Housing on this. When it was initially proposed. And it talked about this being an ideal location.
Yes, I thank you, Your Worship, for the reminder and the inquiry, because I do sit on Medicine Hat Community Housing. They did provide a letter when they were asking council to donate the land that talked about the use of the land. And at the time, at that council meeting, I do recall this, I said I would defer to their expertise on what their clients and residents required. And so that was laid out in the letter. I don't remember when the donation was. I want to say December, but I could be wrong about the date.
City Manager Mitchell or Managing Director Stouth, did you have any information on the transit?
Kipling Street, or pardon me, thank you, Your Worship, and through the chair. Kipling Street is on a bus route. I'd have to check and see where exact closest bus stop to that would be. Certainly within easy walking distance. The other question was the closest grocery store? It'd be Safeway on the Hill.
Councillor Knodel, you had something you wanted to add?
Thanks, Mayor Clark. I just have, I Googled the bus routes, and there's one as close as, I would say probably a walk of about 3 to 4 minutes from this location. So those routes are just available by searching like Medicine Hat bus route map. That's how I got there. In regards to whether there's a grocery store that the bus goes directly to. It is on a route, but it's a bit of a roundabout way to get there, but you can still take the bus to the grocery store. Actually, I think the easiest, just looking at the map here, the easiest grocery store would still be Safeway, but there's also IGA within the realm of where you'd ride a bus to.
Thank you, Councillor
Yeah.
Canoto. Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council or comments before I close the public hearing? Councillor Canoto.
I'm ready and looking forward to seeing this come to fruition so that there's more affordable housing in our community.
So we will just retract that. Okay. So I will now declare the public hearing closed.
Your worship, I'll take this opportunity to move that council give second reading to bylaw 4772, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from community services and designated road right-of-way to medium-density residential district.
I'll second that.
All right. Do we have, I don't see any speakers, so we will vote. And that's unanimous.
So with that, your worship, I move that council gives third and final reading to bylaw 4772.
Second.
Seeing no speakers, we'll vote on the motion. Bylaw 4772 is passed. We will now move on to item 9.2, bylaw 4782, to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from low-density residential district to medium-density residential district. And once again, we have Manager Sissons to introduce the item.
So thank you, Your Worship. So as mentioned, I'm here to present a summary of Land Use Bylaw Amendment 4782, an application by the landowner to rezone lots 88 to 95, Block 1, Plan 0710900, which is also known as 170 to 192 Somerset Way, Southeast, and that's to rezone it to medium-density residential district. So as in the previous presentation, I'll just be talking a little bit about the site context, the amendment details, the legal policy context, site photos, and administrative recommendation. So this site is located in the Southlands neighborhood. The area consists of low-density housing, medium-density housing, commercial areas, and open space. The site is directly adjacent to South Boundary Road to the east, low-density housing to the north and west, and medium-density housing and neighborhood commercial to the south. There are 8 low-density sites to be rezoned as part of this application with a total area of 0.4 hectares. The land use bylaw amendment is for rezoning the subject site from low-density residential to medium-density residential. The site has never been developed and has kind of sat there since the initial neighborhood was built. There has been interest in the subject site to develop it into a medium-density residential development. Under the current land use bylaw, the low-density residential district only supports up to 2 dwellings on a site. The land was previously zoned as R2 when you go back to the previous land use bylaw when it was first serviced, and it was subdivided around 2006 with the intent to build attached housing. The rezoning amendment was circulated to the TCC group, and there was no major concerns with the rezoning the site to medium density. At this point, until further information is known, the TCC reviews are generally fairly broad. So the next steps, if the rezoning is approved, will be possible lot consolidation or re-subdivision if required, and then development permit applications. So rezoning the site to medium-density residential accommodates medium-density developments and is generally supported by Council Strategic Plan 6.8. As mentioned, the site was originally subdivided in 2006, and the surrounding residential area has been completely developed except for this last block of lots. The site is currently vacant, and there is interest to develop it. The site is part of the South Residential Sector within the Municipal Development Plan and is classified as a suburban typology on the urban transect model. Suburban areas are primarily low-density areas, but they also do include various housing types, parks, schools, churches, small commercial nodes, etc. The MDP's Livable Neighborhoods Guiding Policy 2B and 5 do recommend that neighborhoods should be determined by both function and intensity, with medium density or high density residential generally located on the perimeter of the neighborhood and ideally along major streets. And also that neighborhoods should support a variety of housing types. So within the concept map from the Southlands Area Structure Plan, this area is identified as a primarily low-density residential area. The ASP outlines residential land uses and key components that assist in determining where they are most suitable. Proximity to arterial and collector roads and access to open space and trails are two of the important features that are identified that makes them suitable sites. So I'll note transit is available along Southlands Boulevard and within Strachan Bay, which is further over in, across South Boundary Road. And both are about a 5 to 10 minute walk. There is a trail system that runs throughout the area, and large green spaces are easily accessible to the north. So the purpose of the current zoning low-density residential district is to provide for smaller scale developments at densities that don't exceed 2 units per lot. So typically you would see site densities ranging from 20 to 30 units per hectare in these areas. The purpose of the medium density residential district is to allow for the development and moderate intensification of residential neighborhoods with low to mid-rise built forms at medium densities. So for things such as multiple unit residential developments, attached housing or apartments. And I've listed some of the maximum building heights and densities allowable under this district. But I will note that because there are some electrical power capacity restrictions for this area, any proposed development would generally be restricted to what power is already allocated to the site. This is an aerial photo of the site. I'll note just in this one that there is a little bit of development on the far north portion. Some of the other lots have sold already and are under development from when this aerial photo was taken. This is an oblique aerial view looking southwest. This is an oblique aerial view looking northeast. The view along the trail in behind the development. This is basically along South Boundary Road. A view looking towards the existing multifamily development to the south. You can see in this photo the foundations and framing from some of the development that's ongoing already. And then a view looking towards the north at the development under construction. So it is recommended through the Municipal Planning Commission that City Council approve bylaw number 4782 to rezone lots 88 to 95, Block 1, Plan 0710900, so 170 to 192 Somerset Way to medium density residential district.
All right, I will call the hearing for bylaw number 4782 to order. If there is anyone that wishes to speak for or against the bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your first and last name and whether you'll be speaking for or against the bylaw. For a second time, if there's anyone who wishes to speak for or against the bylaw, please come down to the podium, state your first and last name and whether you'll be speaking for or against the bylaw. For a third and final time, if there's anyone wishing to speak for or against the bylaw, please come down to the podium. State your first and last name and whether you'll be speaking for or against the bylaw. Councillor Hirsch, or I guess City Clerk, did we receive any submissions?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Once again, the advertising and notification requirements for this application were completed in compliance with the Municipal Government Act. Legislative Services did send out notifications to adjacent landowners, and there were no submissions based on those notifications.
Okay, thank you. And just a reminder, we are in the public hearing, so questions and clarifying questions and only. Councillor Hirsch.
Well, Your Worship, I appreciate the previous application and member citizen that asked about location for busing and groceries. And in fact, with this application, I asked that at municipal planning, but maybe for the record, maybe we can highlight where the adjacent areas are in terms of going back to the map, just for people to have awareness of really the location, because it's, what would that be considered, behind Home Depot, adjacent to Ashley Furniture, which is of course in that power center that Walmart's in. And the collector, that being obviously South Boundary Road, that I believe have bus. It's just a matter, I guess, with the application, there could be warranted another bus stop being planted there if application was made. Is that fair?
So through your worship, yeah, so the one of the bus, there's actually two bus routes that are in proximity to this site. So if you, from the site, there's a little cut through to that kind of east-west linear park trail system. And if you followed that towards Southlands Boulevard, basically at the northeast corner of the larger park, there's a bus stop there for one of the routes. And if the other one is over in Strachan Bay, so in the red area shown on the map, in the northeast quadrant of that red area, if that makes.
Nope, thank you. Yep. And we did, by the way, this was a conversation we had, the same thing at municipal planning at the meeting itself, so looking out for Mr. Caleb over there.
Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the chair. Just a question for you, Manager Sissons. I recall years ago, there was a development, I'm just in that area, more behind Home Depot, I guess, of condominiums, townhouses that were built on, I guess the land would have been irrigated and the foundations sunk. I guess do we know much about the land that is going to be developed? Was that, it might not be in that area, but it's in and around that area. I'm just wondering if you knew anything about that.
Yeah, so through your worship, so there was a lot of historical canal systems that ran through this area. When the neighborhood was developed in the early 2000s, they would have done geotechnical and put in fill and address that issue. So, yeah.
All right, seeing no further speakers, I will call the hearing for bylaw 4782 to a close.
So with that, Your Worship, I move that council give second reading to bylaw 4782, bylaw City of Medicine Hat to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from low-density residential district to medium-density residential district.
I'll second.
Seeing no speakers, we'll vote on the motion. And that's unanimous.
So with that, Your Worship, I move that council gives third and final reading to bylaw 4782.
Second.
And any debate? Seeing no speakers, we'll vote on third and final reading. And bylaw 4782 is passed. Moving on to item 9.3, bylaw 4783 to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands for mixed-use district to open space district. And once again, we have Manager Sissons to introduce this item.
So thank you, Your Worship. So I'm here to present a summary of Land Use Bylaw Amendment 4783, an application by, in this case, the city, to rezone Block 0, Plan 4415F0, which is also known as 840 and 844 Industrial Avenue Southeast, to Open Space District. So as in the previous presentations, I'll just run through the site context, the amendment details, the legal policy context, some site photos, and administrative recommendation. So the site is located in the southeast section of the River Flats area of the city. The site is adjacent to the Seven Persons Creek and a riparian zone, with the flood berm running directly down the middle of the 2.1 hectare parcel from north to south. So the land use bylaw amendment is for rezoning the subject site from mixed use district to open space district. A city initiated 22 subdivision approval for the flood berm, created 3 separate lots from the existing parcel. And a condition of that subdivision approval was to rezone 2 of the new parcels. One is dedicated as a public utility lot, which is where the berm is, and one is an environmental reserve lot. So rezoning the site to open space is supported by Council's strategic plan, specifically 6.5, resilience and sustainability, as it demonstrates we value the role of our natural environment and how that taking action with appropriate zoning and ensuring it remains a protected natural area. So this site is identified as a sensitive environmental area within the municipal development plan. So it is important that any future land uses are consistent with the context of the site. In this case, the natural area that is subject to potential flooding and should essentially remain as is. The site is within the historic clay district within the River Flats area redevelopment plan. This plan does not show this area as an open space district. However, because the ARP was adopted prior to the installation of the flood berm and wouldn't have considered that berm during its drafting. Given the flood concerns in the area from the recent events, the berm was installed to help protect the area from future flooding. So the dynamics of the site have shifted from that adoption of the plan. The open space district is, in the land use bylaw, does state that as one of the purposes that it is to provide for the development of open spaces that may contain natural areas. So this open space district is really the only district that focuses on the preservation of natural areas. The subject site as a mixed use district does not accurately reflect the current or future use of this site, and to align its use with the land use bylaw, rezoning to open space is required. So this is an aerial photo of the original parcel. I'll note that not the entire area is being rezoned, it's just the eastern 2/3. So the site is quite large. So this is just a panoramic view of the site looking north. A view of the flood berm and Medalta looking towards the north as well. And this is on top of the berm, looking north as well. This is the berm and the western side of the berm, which is going to be designated as a public utility lot, and it's looking towards the northeast. And this is on the other side of that berm, looking towards the environmental reserve area. This is also the environmental reserve area from across the roadway. And then from the north looking south, this is the berm and public utility lot. And then the berm and the environmental reserve site looking to the south. So it is recommended through the Municipal Planning Commission that City Council approve bylaw number 4783 to rezone Block 0 Plan 4415 FO, which is also known as 840 and 844 Industrial Avenue Southeast, to open space district.
Thank you. I will now call the public hearing for bylaw number 4783 to order. City Clerk, did we receive any submissions?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. The advertising and notification requirements for this public hearing were completed in compliance with the Municipal Government Act. Legislative Services mailed out the notices to adjacent property owners, and there were no written submissions received for this. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's any member of the public who wishes to come down or who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium, state your first and last name and whether you'll be speaking for or against the bylaw. For a second time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium, state your first and last name and whether you'll be speaking for or against the bylaw. And for a third and final time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium, state your first and last name and whether you'll be speaking for or against the bylaw. Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, Manager Sissons, I have a question for you. Thank you. So in reading through this material and the MDP, I see sensitive environmental area, environmental reserve, and open space sort of being the terms that are crossing over each other or playing with each other a little bit. Can you just tell me, distinguish those for me and why the recommendation here is open space as opposed to environmental reserve?
So through your worship, I did anticipate this question because it's often one that we get. So on the land title, that's where you would have the designation of environmental reserve. So really there's two types of reserve land that you'll see most often. So environmental reserve is intended for more sensitive land areas, like a area that would flood or an unstable slope or something like that. And you would also see municipal reserve, which is more intended for parks, recreation, school sites, that type of thing. So that's the actual designation on a land title. The other aspect we're talking about is the zoning, which is under the land use bylaw. So our zoning to reflect those designations is typically open space zoning, which allows for things like parks, recreation sites, environmentally sensitive areas. Under the municipal development plan, we do identify various areas as sensitive environmental area, and it's more from a policy perspective, and I'll just kind of read that statement of what that is. It's basically a natural area site that has been inventoried prior to potential development and which, because of its features or characteristics, is significant to Medicine Hat from an environmental perspective. So that may include, for example, areas containing rare flora, wildlife habitat, floodplains, riparian areas, wetlands, escarpments, and or native grasslands.
So thank you very much. So I got it now. But what I couldn't get from the MDP is any example, or are any examples of what would be a sensitive environmental area in Medicine Hat. If they're in the map, I sort of missed them, but I was just curious to see when you describe something that way, what makes it that way?
I don't have the particular, through your worship, I don't have the particular page number in front of me, but actually I do. Sorry, it's on figure 12, page 53. And it does identify various areas on a map throughout the city that would be kind of considered that sensitive environmental area. So that those are areas that if we received an application or something like that, we would just take a little bit closer look and see if they meet the criteria for environmental reserve designation during a subdivision, or even under some of the new changes to the MGA, they have another designation called a conservation reserve that as a municipality, we can acquire the lands if they do have interest to us.
Okay, thank you.
Did you also say, I just want to clarify, that this rezoning was a condition of a subdivision that's already happened?
Through your worship, that would have been one of the conditions of the subdivision approval.
So just the timing wise, why why are we doing it now? Like if it's a condition of the subdivision, why are we rezoning it after the subdivision?
So with subdivisions, it's kind of a two-part process. So we would receive a subdivision application, we would review the material, we would then issue an approval with or without conditions. Then it would be up to the applicant to go and complete those conditions. And then they come back to the city and they seek what's called endorsement. So then once they've checked off all those boxes, we would say it's good to go. They would then take that to land titles and register it. So this is one of those conditions.
So the subdivision is still pending endorsement from the city?
Correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Seeing no further speakers, I will call the public hearing for bylaw number 4783 to a close.
Sorry, Your Worship, I move that council gives second reading to bylaw 4783, a bylaw of City of Medicine Hat to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from mixed-use district to open space district.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Seeing no speakers, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, I move that council gives third and final reading to bylaw 4783.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing no speakers, we'll vote on third and final reading. And bylaw 4783 is passed. Moving on to item 9.4, formerly 10.1, in our agenda packages is a non-statutory public hearing for bylaw 4708, the Clean Energy Improvement Tax bylaw. And to introduce this bylaw, we have Jarrett Dickey, Manager Municipal Services Business Support, and Jonathan Linowski, Business Analyst Municipal.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. I'm Jarrett Dickey, Manager Municipal Business Support, and with me tonight is my colleague Jonathan Linowski, a business analyst within our strategy and analysis team. Tonight we have the privilege of presenting the Clean Energy Improvement Program, the associated bylaw, and the funding request to support the implementation of the program for residential properties in Medicine Hat. I'll try to keep it short, but there's lots of details, but we are essentially asking for approval of the bylaw and the funding. So the Clean Energy Improvement Program, also known as CEIP, is a voluntary financing program that reduces the barriers for residential property owners to install energy efficient and renewable energy upgrades in their homes. It's also known as the PACE program in other jurisdictions. Property owners can finance clean energy upgrades and pay the cost back through their property taxes. CEIP is different from other financing instruments as this financing is tied to the property and not the property owner. It's a collaborative project working with Alberta municipalities as the program administrator as they are designated under the Clean Energy Improvements Regulation. This bylaw approval enables the City of Medicine Hat to partner with Alberta municipalities to deliver the program. In April of 2020, Council requested that administration work towards implementation of the Clean Energy Improvement Program. This program aligns with Council's strategic priority of resilience and sustainability. I'll go over the highlights of the bylaw. So the bylaw enables the city to partner with Alberta municipalities to deliver the program. It authorizes the city to borrow up to $6 million to finance clean energy improvements for residential properties for the first 4 years of the program. It establishes maximum interest borrowing rates of 9%. Typically, what we've seen across the province and other jurisdictions is a range of 2.7 to 3.5%. For purposes of repayment, it authorizes the levying of a tax on the tax roll for properties taking part in the program. It establishes upper and lower limits for residential projects, the minimum being $3,000 and the maximum being $50,000, as well as the maximum repayment term of 25 years. It sets forth some financing terms and conditions for the program applicants, and those criteria are outlined within the bylaw. For example, applicants are not in tax arrears or bankrupt, and the property is not in foreclosure. This slide, we worked with Alberta municipalities to determine what the potential uptake of the program is. It's estimated to be approximately 258 residential projects within the first 4 years. Program uptake in other jurisdictions since it's been launched has been higher than anticipated. As mentioned earlier, the bylaw authorizes the city to borrow up to $6 million to finance, and those borrowing would occur as projects are completed, not all at once. And these borrowings made by the city do not count towards the city's debt limit. Any costs of borrowing would be passed on to the applicant and repaid through their property taxes. So the funding source for the program, as I mentioned, so this is step one in many steps towards implementation. So once the bylaw is passed, we will begin, or we'll start working with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to develop and implement the program, the financing program. The FCM offers a limited program term of 4 years, which includes the low interest loan, which is available for up to 80% of the program costs. As well, they provide grant funding of up to 50% of the loan amount to help support the operating costs or administration of the program. Administration, so we will pursue $4.8 million of financing through FCM, which is 80% of the $6 million. The remaining $1.2 million will be sourced through internal loan from city reserves. And then the operating grant funding is estimated at approximately $2.4 million. The operating grant funding does not need to be repaid. It is used, as I mentioned, to cover administration costs, municipal staff time, marketing costs, training, and other incentives. So detailed the program costs, so that it is going to cost some money to administer this program, city time as well as Alberta municipalities. As I mentioned earlier, the first 4 years of the program will be financed using the grant, since it's considered a pilot phase. If the program is successful in the first few years, administration will explore the feasibility of increasing the amount that can be borrowed for the program and scale up the number of retrofits and expanding the program if necessary. Like I mentioned, it's a combination or collaboration between the City of Medicine Hat and Alberta municipalities. Alberta municipalities is the administrator of the program, and I'll walk through some of the roles and responsibilities in the later part of this presentation. So this graphic shows a high-level timeline. So right now we're in the market study, preliminary application and approval of the bylaw. So we've been doing some things congruently. Some things have to wait until the bylaw is approved before we can start making application. But it is a bit of a process in the fact that we do have to work with collaboratively with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities as well as Alberta municipalities. All this information that we're sharing tonight will be available on a public website, on the city's website, later tonight or tomorrow morning for the public to see and answer questions. So this is really the process. I won't get into a lot of the details, but if you guys want, I can certainly answer questions about the process. So like I said, this is the first step of approving the bylaw, allowing us to start the process as far as getting approval to work with Federation of Canadian Municipalities and Alberta municipalities towards that grant funding. So what is the municipality responsible for? So it's estimated that we're going to require approximately half of a position, and these responsibilities aren't with one individual, it's across the organization. For example, we'll need the tax and assessment department will need legal team to develop terms and conditions, customer service to deal with the public, as well as communication and marketing to promote the program. So although it is half a position, it is a shared responsibility across the organization. Some of our responsibilities are to verify the applicant is in good standing from a tax perspective, execute a financing agreement with the property owner, obviously record and collect the clean energy improvement charge, provide funds to pay contractors, collaborate on marketing plans, and coordinate with local marketing efforts and events. Alberta municipalities, they're the program administrator. They will be responsible for recruiting and onboarding contractors, application processing and technical reviews, facilitate agreement executions, verify project completion, lead marketing plan and program website, customer service, as well as performance reporting. So as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of steps in the process, and we've done a good job of expediting it as quickly as we can. With such a high intake or interest in the program, Alberta municipalities had to cohort municipalities together, so we were waiting for their support for the last little bit. But fortunately, we were able to learn some lessons from other municipalities that had implemented the program already. But this provides some high-level milestones as far as what we need to do as far as check boxes to get to full implementation, which we're expecting in Q2 of 2024. So we're currently in the bylaw marketing study and preliminary application phase, looking at full application phase once approval, detailed program design, signing the financing agreement, finalizing finance agreement with Canadian Efficiency Financing Program. That's the organization that will provide the grant, finalizing program terms and conditions, and then launching and marketing the program. So in conclusion, our recommendation is for council to implement the financing of, or the approval of the Clean Energy Improvement Program through adoption of the Clean Energy Improvement Tax Bylaw number 4708, as well as a new major operating expense for 2023 in the amount of $6 million, funded $4.8 million from Community Efficiency Financing Program and $1.2 million from internal loan repayable to city reserves. Upon approval tonight, there will be a media release issued and a website available for the public.
Thank you, Manager Dickey. Stay close. I will now call the public hearing for Bylaw 4708 to order. If there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium, state your first and last name, as well as whether you'll be speaking for or against the bylaw. If there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium, state your first and last name, and whether you'll be speaking for or against the bylaw. For a third and final time, if there is any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium, state your first and last name, as well as whether you'll be speaking for or against the bylaw. Mr. Payne.
Your Worship, Scott Payne, I am opposed to the bylaw. I just have a question that perhaps you may be able to answer, somebody else on council or the city manager. What is the main purpose for this program? What is the goal?
Manager Dickey?
Through the chair to Mr. Payne. It's a tool to provide customers with another option. So there are other options available, like the HatSmart program, which provides grant funding, greener homes that provide grant funding. This is a financing tool that if customers don't have cash up front to pay for upgrades, it's a tool that they can use if they're not able to get a loan from the bank, or if they are, it's potentially a lower interest loan to help support their upgrades.
So to clarify, this is a financing program. This is not an environmental program.
It's a financing program to support environmental initiatives, yes.
Okay, so what I would recommend is that all councillors and your worship and city manager and staff ask yourselves a few questions before you vote for this. So if this is to support environmental initiatives, what is the target for reduction of greenhouse gases or kilojoules used? What is the environmental impact that we're looking for this? If we don't have a target, exactly why are we doing this? Why are we voting for this? Other questions that I would ask is, we just passed the budget 4 months ago, or a little over 4 months ago, and now we're asking for, in the city's words, major operating expense of about $6 million for a very tight focused group of people, 258 people at up to $21,000 per person. So is this the best option for the money? If we have an environmental urgency that we need to reduce carbon or kilojoules used or whatever, could this money be used better elsewhere? We don't have any targets. What are the requirements of the people? Do we rate their houses and determine what their R factor is and what it should be? How are we going to measure success? So I recommend that the City Council table this. There's a lot of things that are missing in here. I don't see anything about the environment written or spoken about what the ultimate impact is going to be. Again, not budgeted. It's not, month 18 into the 2-year budget. It's only month 4. So why wasn't this included in the last budget? And every time in my previous career, when I asked for more money, I would say, okay, I found savings here, but I need just a little bit more. Have we done that with this project? Have we said, you know what, we could trim here, and maybe we only need half the money that we need? And I think these are the things, the difficult questions that I hope that you'll ask yourselves and you'll ask the staff. But I don't see this as really helping the environment. Could we take the $6 million expense or the loan that we're going to take, and could we, buy 1 million trees and become a carbon sink? Or could we put that into our power plants and retrofit them to reduce their emissions or improve their efficiency? Or could we take it to some of our older hockey rinks that have the older ice plants or pools or whatever else? I do not think that this has been scrutinized enough to actually be voted on today. So again, I recommend that you table it, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. My understanding, Manager Dickey, is that this program is actually cost neutral to the city because we are loaning this money out, and it will be repaid to the city.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, it is a revenue neutral or cost neutral initiative for the City of Medicine Hat. We're receiving grant funding, and the city's contribution is a repayable loan through reserves or from reserves. So there is no net operating costs, and the operating costs that we do incur are covered through the grant. So there are we're receiving $4.8 million, hopefully, as part of our application. But there's restrictions on what that money can be used for.
Okay, and I will at some point go to Managing Director Pankos to update us on the environmental framework. I have one more speaker.
Me again, Caleb Orge. While I was up there, I double-checked the other name this program goes by, PACE, and it seems there's an episode of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver where he rips into the shortcomings of programs like this. I can't speak to the specifics of this particular program, but one example given is suppose someone tries to get an advantage on their utility bills by taking advantage of this program, but they wind up selling the house later on. This assessment to the, this alteration to the property taxes then gets passed on to the new owner, thus allowing a kind of pump and dump scheme whereby someone could buy a house, take advantage of this program, and then pass the cost on to somebody else, but then use the assessed value and the money of the sale to buy something else. Along with a lot of other things that may or may not have been factored into this particular proposal. And it is apparently, according to that episode, quite full of horror stories for low-income people who've tried to take advantage of this. I recommend that everyone on council go ahead and watch. I believe that episode is available on YouTube of Last Week Tonight. And those are some possible shortcomings of this that I believe need to be checked and then addressed in either in this proposal or in a future proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Manager Dickey, do you have Any comments on that?
Yeah, through the chair. Certainly that is one of the challenges. With this project or with this program, the loan is registered against the property. So it is on the onus is on the owner and the realtor when a property is sold, which would go through land titles and that would be registered. So there are mechanisms in place that will ensure that that doesn't happen. And there are early repayment options as well. So if you sell a property, you can repay that loan as part of that sale. Or say you have a windfall of cash and you want to pay off that loan. That's all the details that we need to work through the terms and conditions in the next 12 months.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
Maybe it's more about admitting my own ignorance. I believe in Canada, it's illegal to sell a property that has a lien on it. So then would this be classified as a lien or an adjustment to the property tax, thus allowing the sale?
I believe it's a city registration on the property, but not a lien.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. So I just have a question in regards to the community efficient financing program. Is it a government, through the chair to Manager Dickey, is this a Government of Alberta program or is it an independent organization that would finance the grant? I have a couple questions.
Okay. Through the chair to Councillor Knoll, it is a federal, organization that is loaning money through the FCM, so Federation of Canadian Municipalities.
Thank you. Okay. So we were sent, I'm going to make this known, I understand the answer to this question, but I just want to make it known that we received a letter with concerns about how this would affect tax rates overall. My understanding is that it won't affect anyone but the homeowner themselves in regards to their property taxes or their assessment value for the time being that they are repaying that particular loan. Just to clarify, that is the case.
Correct.
Okay. And then would this program be promoted through HatSmart or would it be a separate entity? Would it be lumped in? Do you have any ideas of how that might look?
That's a great question. That's, again, one of the things that we'll be working through over the next 12 months once we get to program launch. There could be changes. There seems to be lots of changes in offerings as far as energy efficiency programs, greener homes, for example, from the federal government has changed and evolved over the last 12 months. They would be complementary. So there are elements of a grant or if you apply for solar, you can get $1,000 from HatSmart, you can get $5,000 from the federal government, and then you can apply through SEEP for the balance of the project to finance it through your property taxes. There's a myriad of options that would be available to customers. So how we stack them or promote them, we'll work with our communications team on how that would look.
Okay, and last one is just in respect to Mr. Payne's question. I know that Mayor Clark was referring to Managing Director Pancoast in regards to those markers of success. Have you thought through that at all? Is there any sort of indication to you and your team as to what would make us successful? And I understand right now there's more of a focus in this conversation in regards to the financial aspect, but do you see, have you looked to other communities as to their markers of success?
For sure, that's a great question. So yes, there are, although we're working on our environmental framework and our strategy, one of the market study parts of the program is we're working through, okay, what does that look like? So we have we estimate 258 projects. We don't know if it's going to be solar, is it going to be insulation, is it going to be windows and doors? So there are targets that will be established. So we'll estimate there's going to be 100 solar installations, and okay, what does that mean from a energy or renewable energy? So there will be targets developed, and that's actually one of the things that Alberta municipalities will be working towards is what are those targets that we establish pre-implementation, and then we'll start measuring them throughout the program as projects get completed. So we have all that information, we'll be sharing that and tracking that. That's part of the project and part of the measures of success.
Thank you. Thank you. Prior to calling on Councillor Hirsch, City Clerk, did we receive any submissions on this bylaw?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Yes, we did. Legislative Services can confirm. One written submission was received by Alex Schultz, resident of Medicine Hat, who wishes to oppose the proposed bylaw. And a copy of the written submission has been shared with council and will become part of the attached record, corporate record within the city council agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Hirsch?
Thanks, Your Worship. Manager Dickey, thanks for the presentation. We know this is an innovative concept. It's something that we're working in partnership with FCM and by existential with the government of Alberta, or Canada, sorry. I guess, can you maybe verbalize to us and the viewing public again, and I know this is, it's big on communication with regards to what's the impact to the city financially, and we know it's net zero, but just to kind of make sure that that's understood. What's the impact to the citizen that makes the application? So they would be obviously taking in money, they would pay it over time, and maybe examine that a little bit. And what's the ultimate result to the general taxpayer? Because I think what I've been hearing literally on the street from a person that pulled me aside saying, hey, is this another handout or tax grab? And really, at the end of the day, I just want to make sure our citizenry knows that this is a good program, B, it's really focused. I kind of do the same analogy that a group of residents get together and they say, hey, we want our back alley paved. Having said that, this is limited to one household who makes that decision. So maybe if you want to illustrate that a little bit for us?
Yeah. Through the chair to Councillor Hirsch, great question. Lots of layers and elements there for sure. To speak to how it affects the city, again, like I said, it's a net zero impact. Will it cause some work administratively? Absolutely. We're going to have to do some work to our tax system, make sure that we're registering things and process-wise, who's involved, making sure that taxpayer, the account is in good standing, and so on and so forth. So there will be some administration involved. That being said, we will be reimbursed for any additional costs that the city incurs. As far as the betterment of the community or the global community, does this program benefit? It is individual. It's a voluntary program. If you have other financing options to do home upgrades, great. If this is an opportunity for you to maybe you don't have those options, it provides another tool that the customers can use. Like I said, it's great in the fact that you can use HatSmart, you can look at greener homes. The programs are similar, but they're different. Like there's different elements, and we could go talk all night about the different programs and what each one supports. That being said, is it a great program? Yeah, absolutely. I think there's businesses within Medicine Hat that have really thrived with HatSmart, be it insulation or solar installations or so on and so forth. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for the community to leverage it. And there's already 9 municipalities in Alberta that have approved this program. And there's several more that are pending or will be approved or launched in the next few months. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for Medicine Hat to have another option to finance energy efficient upgrades.
So just a follow up. So I'm just speaking with respect to Mr. Payne's commentary about, at the end of the day, what's the measurement? Really, the eyes and the beholder of the person making the application. So if they really feel that, hey, putting solar panels on my roof will make a material difference, I'm willing to make that application, take on the loan, et cetera, then that's kind of the proof is in the pudding from their perspective. We don't make any, we're not really making any commentary either or for it. It's just that it's an available vehicle for them to get their needs met earlier rather than with a financing piece. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Robbins?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair, I have a very specific question, and it's about section 15 of the bylaw. Section 15 is the prohibited agreements where the city shall not enter into a clean energy improvement agreement, where then it lists a whole bunch of things. Some of them you talked about, but one kind of drew my attention, which is 15E. So the city will not enter or shall not enter a clean energy improvement agreement where there appears to be limited equity in the property. is there a definition of what limited equity is? Will that come out in terms of policy? Will that have other cities define that? Oh, Mr. Lanowski, there you are. Sorry to ask you a question, it had to be me, but yes, please.
Thank you through the chair. Yeah, that's one of the program design decisions we have to make, is what do we define as limited equity? Every municipality has to set their own kind of limit for what that exact number is in a property. And they want to make sure that property owners that are applying to this program are, have enough capital and that it mitigates any lending risk, essentially.
Right, and so some of the sort of question that we heard earlier in the PACE program in the States, that maybe that piece wasn't considered as carefully.
Yes,
That's not really a question, I'm sorry, but if you have any comments about it?
Yes, this is a very carefully considered program. It takes a lot of the lessons learned from PACE across North America and has applied them very thoughtfully in Alberta. As Manager Dickey mentioned before, there are 9 municipalities that have launched this program in Alberta and another 22 that are in the stages of launching it. So nearly every major municipality in Alberta will have this program operating within the next matter of months. Thank you.
City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you through the chair, and I think it's probably a question for Manager Dickey. Just to follow up on that comment, you mentioned early on in your presentation about lessons learned, and could you expand on that a little bit? Just from, you said because we were in the second cohort that we managed to learn some things, so could you outline those, please?
Absolutely, through the chair to Ms. Mitchell. So like I mentioned earlier, there's 9 municipalities that have already approved the program. So they had bylaws, public bylaws that were available that we were able to look at, review. With that cohort, Jonathan is part of that cohort, and they meet, I think, once a month, and they talk about where they are in the process, challenges, and those meetings are chaired by Alberta municipalities. So we're supported. It's not the city of Medicine Hat. We're not on an island doing our own thing. We're being supported, talking about, okay, we did this, oh, that didn't work, and maybe some of the challenges that other municipalities have gone through. So although we're a little bit late to the game, and partially because there was a backlog of municipalities, there is benefits to that and the fact that we have those lessons learned and we are able to glean that knowledge.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you. Manager Dickey, I just had some clarification through the chair, sorry. And I might have missed it, I apologize, I read this a few times, but is this only residential or is it business as well?
Through the chair to Ms. Sharps, it is for residential properties only.
Okay, so what if it's a mixed-use property where somebody's got residential on the top and a business on the bottom, but they own the entire building?
Yeah, the mixed use and multifamily are, I would say, a case by case. We have to look at them individually. There are specific criteria which are eligible and there are specific criteria which are not eligible.
Okay, and then my last question was around the contractors. Is there an attempt to make that local contractors? I know years ago there was some programming through HatSmart that I went to go look at, and I had to use somebody in Calgary who referred me somebody in Edmonton, and it was like, ugh, awful. So I never ended up getting the work done because they never got back to me. So is this going to be in a situation where the homeowner can choose the contractor from a prescribed approval, or how does that work?
Great question. Yeah, so that's one of the things that Alberta municipalities will help us with, is to make sure that the contractors are qualified to do the work. They're not fly by night. They're registered. They have all the business permits and that type of documentation and approval process in place, so that the customer is protected and they are getting the work done that they need to get done. So yeah, there is a bit of a more onerous process, I would say, than we've had in the past. And that's part of the I guess the rigor that this program goes through.
Councillor McGrogan.
Thank you through the chair. Just a quick question for clarity. So any money we pull out of reserve to fund this, we will recoup the interest that we would have earned? That's the question.
Through the chair to Councillor McGrogan, that's correct. Yeah, that's the plan.
Mr. Orge, you have an additional comment?
Yes, it's in regard to Councillor Hirsch's earlier question about the financing for individual properties and property owners. I believe that was slightly missed in the back and forth. One of the things I noticed in my brief research up in the gallery is that banks, not to invoke the specter of the financial crisis, I really apologize for this, but it is germane. Banks turn mortgages into mortgage-backed securities, which is another way they make money off of it. It's been noted that houses in the PACE program are often not included in those mortgage-backed securities, which means banks could make less money off of them and thus change the conditions for which they offer mortgages. And since I'm a renter and I'm really thinking about the other guys who will be left holding the bag here, if it's harder to get a mortgage after this has been done, then the idea I raised earlier of someone having a financial instrument attached to the property tax, doing the work, raising the value of the property, selling it, getting out of the property, and then passing the cost on to the poor soul who got it after them, or landlords change buildings, the new landlord decides to do this, and then renters are essentially paying the city back as opposed to the property owner. How will this financial instrument deal with that, if at all?
I'm not sure I'll let Mr. Lanowski or Mr. Dickey address that, but since it is registered on the land title, any potential purchaser would be aware that they're acquiring the loan with the property.
Then again, wouldn't that potentially make the property harder to sell, thus someone who's looking to move to a different house or someone who's looking to buy their first house would then face an additional barrier in moving home?
I will let Manager Lanowski, or sorry, Manager Dickey or Mr. Lanowski answer. Because it is individually driven, that would be up to the person applying for the loan, and then separately on a potential purchaser, it would be up to them to determine whether or not they want to acquire the loan by purchasing the house. Any staff member want to supplement that?
Yeah, so pardon me, as we mentioned earlier, there would be disclosure that there is a loan or a tax obligation on that property. The other option is obviously through negotiation, if there's improvements to the property and the value has increased and they are firm on the price, they can just say, well, as part of the condition that that loan would, or that tax obligation would be paid to. So at any point in time, the SEEP obligation on that property could be paid. So whether through a sale of a property or, like I said, a windfall of cash, that obligation could be paid. But there is disclosure obligations by the homeowner as well as the realtor and or lawyers involved, not unlike any other liens or other municipal obligations, whether it be local improvement, et cetera. So there are disclosure requirements to when they sell.
Councillor McGrogan? You're off. Okay, I'll give you one more.
I'm going to drive this home a little bit. So yes, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there is a potential for this financial instrument to become a millstone around a property's neck if someone in the chain messes up. Is that what I'm hearing? No, why not?
I think that it's because each person in the chain has a choice of whether or not they want to go into the loan agreement or if they want to acquire that loan by purchasing a property.
I guess that's the answer I'm going to have to accept. Thank you.
If anyone has anything to add to that, that was my best answer. Councillor Hirsch, sorry.
Well, I'll just speak as a bank representative. There was a question relative, would it be more troubling for the bank? Quite frankly, no. What ends up happening in traditional bank financing is a appraisal gets done on the property. The bank will lend up to 75% of the value. Anything less in terms of a down payment by the purchaser would qualify for CMHC financing. So essentially, nothing would be changed, and I think the point was made where a person potentially buying it could say, hey, I would like your proceeds to pay off this loan in a form of a business agreement. Just no different when you have a sale of a property, or the option could be that that loan can maybe carry forward, but you would reduce the price of the house accordingly, right? So I don't think there would be any millstone on anyone. Quite frankly, if it's listed on title, then that would be discovered obviously as well. There would be a report given. No bank would advance until title's obviously reviewed, and it would be flagged even in that point of view. So I don't really see it. I think that there's going to be a level of transparency right along the curve as we move forward. So I appreciate the consternation about it, and it is relatively new initiative, but from a banking perspective, it wouldn't really hold much, wouldn't impact to any kind of material degree. Thank you.
Managing Director Pankos, do you have anything to add in addition to what Manager Dickey said in relation to the development of targets and how that would fit in with our environmental framework?
Sure, thank you, Mayor Clark. Essentially, yes, we are working on our environmental framework. We are on progress for year-end completion of that framework. We have completed our baseline studies and review, and we have initiated our stakeholder engagement process, and we do have 2 public sessions coming up, one a core stakeholder group as well as an open house coming up this spring. That will help refine what our focus areas are. It'll be through the process through the year that will define what those specific targets are. But this is an opportunity, as Council requested staff to explore, that could be an additional tool that could help remove financial barriers for energy efficiency and energy-related upgrades on properties. I hope that answers your question, Mayor Clark.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further speakers, I will call this public hearing to a close.
Yes, thank you. Before I make the motion, I just wanted to make a note that there is 2 very small typos in spelling errors in the bylaw. One is in section 16. It should read revenue raised instead of revenue raise. And the second is in section 21 where it says singing instead of signing. So those are immaterial to the content of the bylaw, and they will be corrected before it is signed. I move that council give second reading to bylaw 4708, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to establish a clean energy improvement program.
Second.
All right, any discussion or debate on this item? Seeing none, we'll vote. Oh, Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make a comment since I couldn't comment during the question period, but I just wanted to say that we've had a lot of requests from the community in the last year of this process, and that I'm sure the staff too are also going to be happy that now we might be listed on the website and they no longer have to field emails from me saying, why aren't we in the cohort listed on the website? I thought we were working on this. So I'm very confident in this process. It's a highly regulated process with established and reputable partners. And I think it's a great financing option for people in the community that are wanting to do energy efficiency work and just have not had the financial means to front that money previously through the other rebate programs. And there was one other thing I was going to mention, but anyways, so I appreciate the work done by the staff on this, and the information that will be available to the community will be probably helpful for those who have questions. Oh, sorry, I do remember what it was. I just think that one way to explain it that might be easier for people to understand, and Councillor Hirsch touched on this, is that local improvement tax, which has been around for a really long time. And so this is just an individual way of accessing funds in the same way that that's done by block. So it's maybe an oversimplified way of explaining the process, but I think it's helpful for people to know how that works. So thank you.
All right, seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous.
I move that council gives third and final reading to bylaw 4708.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing no speakers, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous, and bylaw 47808 is passed.
I move that council approves a new 2023 major operating expense budget for the Clean Energy Improvement Program in the amount of $6 million, which includes a $4.8 million loan from Community Efficient Financing Program and a $1.2 million as an internal loan repayable to the city's reserves.
Second.
Any discussion? Councillor Hirsch.
So through the chair to Managing Director Agert, so this will or will not count towards our debt ceiling and our debt?
Will not.
Will not, thank you.
All right, seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous. Being that we are 2 hours into the meeting, I will suggest that we take a 5-minute break. Thank you. At item 11 of the agenda, which is new business. Item 11.1, Bylaw 4779, 2023 Property Tax Bylaw. And we have an introduction by Lola Barta, Director of Finance, and Sue Sturkenberg, City Assessor.
Okay, good evening, Your Worship and members of council. So tonight, I will provide an overview of the assessment market and growth changes in 2023, provide scenarios for council to consider when setting the 2023 municipal property tax rates, and request approval for establishing the 2023 property tax rates. So setting tax rates is a three-step process. We've already completed step one, where council has approved the tax revenue budget. The assessor has already determined the assessment values, and we are currently at step three, so utilizing the taxation framework to set tax rates. Just a reminder of the basic tax formula. We take our total tax revenue budget divided by the assessment base, which gives us a tax rate. The tax rate is then applied to the property assessed value to get us our tax payment. In 2023, we had an approved tax revenue budget of $84.8 million, and it's distributed to the following services. So the chart on this following slide here shows that police, fire and emergency services, municipal works, airport, parks and rec, and community development are the largest pieces of that pie. Also, just to note that property taxes are not a fee for service, but a way of distributing the costs for government services. So as I mentioned previously, the assessor determines the assessment values, taking into consideration the changes in the market and any new growth. So the changes from 2022 to 2023 shows that assessment physical growth increased by 1.54% versus a budget of 1%. That equated to an increase of $142 million in assessment valuation. And this was mainly due to new development. That includes Unit 17, as well as development in other commercial, office, retail, space development, including banks. As well, there was a market increase of 5.2% or $478 million. And this was due to an increase in rental rates and higher sales valuations. And just a reminder that this reflects the market valuations at July 2022. The information on the right-hand side of the chart here shows the impact on the tax revenue. So the physical growth increased by 2.1%. Again, we had a budget of 1%. The market change increased by 4.5%. So when we create our budget, we start with the prior year tax amount, and then add in our estimated assessment growth and tax increase to determine the tax revenue. So when we're comparing what actually happened, you can see that the assessment growth was higher than budget by 1.1%. And so we do budget for any changes in assessment growth. Normally, in the past, we've budgeted 0.5%. However, in 2023, we knew that there was going to be a larger increase, and so we did increase that budget to 1%. As you can see, the actual assessment growth increased by 1.1% up to 2.1%. So it came in higher than what we expected. We don't normally budget for market growth, as this can be very difficult to predict. So what actually happened in 2023 is that we had an increase of 4.5%. And so because the market was good, we had growth in assessment valuation, and therefore, if we're keeping within our same total tax amount of $84.8 million, we would see that our municipal tax would actually decrease in order to come up to that revenue valuation. The principles and guidelines that we have set are used to set the tax rates, understand the results compared to the previous year, mitigate the tax rate impact to property owners, and understand the key factors that shift the tax burden. So the principles are based on fairness and equity, predictability and stability, comparability, and transparency and visibility. The guidelines are used to look at a number of factors when we determine the tax rates. So we take into consideration or look at the impact to the prior year tax distribution, the impact to the prior year tax ratio, and what we're looking for there is trying to keep it consistent, or in the case of non-residential, we want to try and ratchet that down closer to 2. We're also looking to make sure that we maintain comparability with like-sized municipalities with respect to the tax ratio. And we take into consideration the market value changes and the assessment growth changes. So over the next few slides, we're going to go through some of the scenarios, and you're going to see that setting property taxes is really a balancing act. If you move the dial, something else is going to be shifted or impacted. Okay, so let's take a look at the first 3 scenarios here. Scenario 1 is taking the 84.8 million tax revenue and applying that using the same distribution percentage as prior year, but we're applying it to the new assessment values. So in this scenario, you can see that the tax ratio decreases for multifamily and increases for non-residential. I just want to draw your attention to the second last column. That's the municipal tax dollar impact. So you can see in this scenario that the impact shifts more to the single family and non-residential, and the benefit goes to the multifamily. I also would like you to note the last column in this scenario. So this is the total tax impact. This is going to include our municipal tax amount as well as our education requisitions. And so you can see that that amount is lower than our municipal tax impact. And the reason for that is the education requisition did not increase from prior year. And so when we apply that to the new assessment values, which have increased, the total impact actually decreases. In scenario 2, we're keeping the tax ratio the same and applying that against the new assessment values. So in this scenario, you can see that the tax distribution changes. So it increases for multifamily and decreases for non-residential. And in this particular scenario, the tax impact shifts more to the multifamily. In scenario 3, we've increased the mill rate equally for each tax class. And so you can see that the tax percent impact has increased 3% across all tax classes. The tax ratio has increased for both multifamily and non-residential. And the impact really shifts to the non-residential in this scenario. So we've added 2 additional scenarios for council to consider. This is really due to the increase in the assessment growth. So as I mentioned previously, we normally would have budgeted for this growth, which we did. We budgeted at 1%. However, the growth did come in higher at 2.1%. So scenario 4A shows increasing the tax rate at 4%, which is what we had originally budgeted for. And that would account for 100% of the assessment growth. So this would mean that the tax revenue would increase by 1.1 million. And in this scenario, you can see that multifamily and non-residential tax ratios increase. And the overall, or the municipal tax impact does increase for multifamily and non-residential, as well as single family. So all classes increase in this scenario. Scenario 4B looks at capturing some of that physical growth, but shifts the benefits to the non-residential tax class. And the reason for doing this is 73% of the growth was attributed to this tax class, and so we are shifting the benefit to that. So the city's tax revenue budget would increase by $508,000. In this scenario, you can see that the tax ratio for multifamily and non-residential increases. And the tax burden is shared amongst all tax classes. So this is our recommendation, and the next slides that follow are going to show you the impact at each class using this recommendation or this scenario. So looking at a single-family median house, so not every taxpayer is going to see an increase in their assessment valuation, and so we're just using the median house as an example here. So in this case, single-family assessment value increased 6%. The municipal increase is $76. The education impact is a decrease of $11. Cypress View is an increase of $9. So the total increase in the tax amount in an annual basis is $74 or 2.7%. Looking at multifamily, a median multifamily unit increased in assessment value of 5%. Municipal tax increase is $314. Education is a decrease of $61. Cypress View an increase of $29. So total tax impact $281 per year or 2.7%. Non-residential, the median impact had an increase of 2% in assessment value. The increase on municipal is $433. Education decrease of $372. Cypress View 25. A total tax impact of $86 per year or 0.4%. This chart is showing the comparison of the non-residential to residential single family. This is the tax ratio comparison. We're using the 2022 tax ratios because we don't have the information for the other municipalities just yet for 2023. They're all doing the same thing in getting their tax rates approved. So for 2022, you can see that we are still within the range when we compare ourselves to like municipalities. And this just breaks it down a little bit further. This is showing the tax rate for single family and non-residential compared to the other municipalities. So you can see where Medicine Hat falls in there. And then this slide shows the multifamily tax ratios compare to comparable municipalities. I do want to note a few items here. So the RM of Wood Buffalo, again, this is based on an 8-suite apartment assessment valuation. You can see that their valuation is quite low at $352,000. They do have a less assessment per unit for their apartments at $44,000 versus other municipalities which range from $85,000 to $159,000. We have double-checked this number with them, and we believe that they have undervalued their apartments. The other item is Airdrie. When we put this presentation together, they didn't provide all of the information. The updated number for them is $1,560,000, and the 2022 municipal tax impact is $4,686. So they are a little bit higher than what we have on this slide. And again, you can see where Medicine Hat lands on this slide. Not all municipalities have a different tax ratio for multifamilies. So you can see there's the RM of Wood Buffalo, Medicine Hat, of course, Red Deer, and Lethbridge do have a different tax ratio for their multifamily units. This slide just really provides a picture of what has happened with the non-residential and multifamily tax ratios over a number of years. So the green line is showing the non-residential impact, and you can see since 2006 that ratio has come down, and we are trying to maintain that level going forward. Multifamily has stayed fairly consistent since 2006, so yeah, no real changes there. So our request to council is to approve scenario 4B to establish the 2023 tax rates. This would increase single-family and multifamily mill rate increase of 3.9%, 2.7% increase for non-residential, and amend the 2023 tax revenue budget by $508,000 to accommodate the additional physical growth. Also adopt, excuse me, also adopt the revised education, Cypress View Foundation, and designated industrial property requisitions, and consider giving first reading to bylaw number 4779, with second and third reading to follow on May 1st. However, if council considers it appropriate, they could give all three readings tonight. Just to note that we do need all three readings by May 1st in order to get the notices mailed out so that taxpayers are able to meet the June 30th deadline. And I'll take any questions.
Yeah, so just to be clear, if we don't give three readings at this meeting, we miss the deadline?
No.
Or,
We can do first reading tonight, or we could do no readings. We do have to have all three readings completed by May 1st. So you could give all three readings on May 1st, or give second and third reading on May 1st.
thank you. Councillor Hirsch?
Thanks, Manager Barta. I'm trying to be proactive this year and not have my phone explode on me with people after the meeting. Just want to draw attention to slide 16, which is I call it the infamous slide that talks about the non-res. We do have, obviously, on the multifamily, fairly consistent, and one would say in the non-res that it's not material, but they're finding trending. And trending seems to be, we seem to have hit a trough in 2000 and now, or sorry, 2020, and now a slight adjustment upwards again. And I think the argument that I get all the time is, show me the value in terms of the fact that the non-res pays double as far as taxes. And I don't necessarily want to go down that road too deep. What I do want to understand is, was there analysis done to understand the impact? Because your point's well made. Whatever we do for one has implications for the others. So when we look at the 2022 at 2.32 versus the proposed 2.38, do we know the math on the impact to keep 232 static, to keep that number?
We do, yeah, and I'll just go back to the scenarios here. So scenario 2 looks at keeping the tax ratio at 2.32 for non-residential. So you can see that it does shift to multifamily as well as residential. Just to also highlight the reason why that ratio is increasing, single family, you can see that they did have a market change, so part of their market valuation increased. And so when you're comparing the valuations, it is going to widen that gap. And so that's part of the reason why that non-residential ratio is increasing, because non-residential assessment valuations have increased.
Non-residential assessments values have increased.
Sorry, single-family.
Okay.
Assessment valuations have increased.
And that creates the divide.
Yeah.
So, but in your commentary, so through the chair, you'd indicated tax revenue growth was attributed to non-res. Is that correct? Like the majority of it, or am I off on that point?
No, you're correct. So when I talk about physical growth, the physical growth was attributed to the non-residential area, about 73%. When I talk about market change, this is the market valuation that has changed in more so on the residential side.
So in some cases, we acknowledge that there's physical growth in the non-res, but there's been assessment growth on the single family. Is that correct?
Say that again.
So there's physical growth in the non-res, but yet there's assessment growth on the single family.
Correct, yeah.
So do they
market.
kind of wash a little bit? Like you know what I mean, on the numbers? Because both factor in, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at it, we talk about physical growth relative to even the assessment growth, right? So,
Yeah, so there was also physical growth in single family, just not as significant as it was in non-residential.
okay. And the proposal at the end is 4B that you're recommending, and that was somewhat of a nod for the growth in those areas as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned that a lot, I believe you said a lot of the increase in non-residential assessment growth was due to Unit 17. Can you expand on that?
Yep. Yeah, so a lot of the non-residential growth came from Unit 17 as well as banks. There was some new commercial and office space, retail development. So those all attributed. Unit 17 was a larger portion of that, but there were other contributors as well.
But we don't pay taxes.
We do.
Okay, so we pay taxes to ourselves, though.
We
So
pay-
it's. Perhaps you could expand on how, that it seems a bit weird to me that we include that because that is a wash. We pay the money and we pay it to ourselves. So it's just a transfer from one area to another.
Correct, yeah. We do have to provide assessment valuations for all taxable properties, and so we do that. Part of that tax assessment also goes to the province for the education requisition. So we would be paying ourselves or providing the money to the municipality.
But it shouldn't count towards excess revenue or like be included in our overall revenue because it's a cost in our budget and a revenue, so it balances out except for the minor amount or the amount of it that would go to Cypress View or education.
Yeah, it does get eliminated through our consolidation process, but it does make up our assessment valuation. So we do look at that when we consider our calculations.
Okay. I'm not sure I fully understand why we're kind of including that in terms of how we're dividing up the ratios necessarily, but maybe someone else can follow up with a better understanding. My second question is, My second question is, if we're giving if 4B is designed to give benefit to non-residential in light of the fact that the assessment growth occurred largely in non-residential, why is the ratio higher?
Yeah, so as I was explaining to Councillor Hirsch, it is that widening gap between single family also increased in their assessment valuation, and so it's the widening of that gap that's creating that higher tax ratio on non-residential.
Right, but and perhaps I'm misunderstanding it, but in scenario 2, it looks like their mill rate decreases, and scenario 4B, it looks like it increases.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the mill rate.
I'm just looking at the percent mill rate change. So in 4B, it's plus 0.7%, and in 2,
Yeah, it's a negative.
it's minus 1.6%. Just wondering how that's a benefit.
How 4B is a benefit?
Yeah, if their mill rate is decreasing in scenario 2.
Yeah, so you can see that their overall tax impact has increased in 4B, 433. In scenario 2, it's only 60. But what ends up happening in scenario 2 is the impact shifts more so towards multifamily and single family. In 4B, it does shift the burden across all tax classes. So not one is really benefiting. When you layer in the total tax impact and layer in that education decrease, you can see that non-residential will only have an $86 total tax impact in this scenario.
But isn't that compared to minus 287 in scenario 2?
It is, yep. And again, you can see that multifamily and single family would have larger increases.
Okay, so my question is, if I'm non-residential and you're saying you're giving me a benefit with a scenario where my total tax impact is plus 86, compared to a scenario where my total tax impact is minus 287, how is that a benefit to me?
Yes, I understand that point, and it is a valid point. It's what we're taking into account here is looking at all tax classes and spreading that benefit across all of the tax classes. So non-residential will still have an increase in their overall taxes as compared to scenario 2, but the other tax classes will also not have a larger increase in 4B.
Managing Director Egert.
I was going to just provide some comments, Mayor, to the previous question, but I think it was already answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGrogan?
Thank you. Through the chair, a quick question. I notice in the assessment values in all three classes, Cypress View is, percentage-wise, I know in the big picture it's not a lot, but it's increased substantially. Who sets that and how does that play into the big picture?
Yeah, that, through the chair to Councillor McGrogan, that is set through the province. They determine what that valuation is and what our portion is that we need to pay for.
Any other questions for Ms. Barda? Seeing none, with thanks. I believe you're on the agenda again, potentially, so. All right. We will, there's business arising here.
Mayor Clark, I move that council give first reading to Bylaw 4779, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to authorize council to impose a property tax for the year 2023 and to exempt certain property from taxation for the year 2023.
I'll second that. Councillor Sharps.
Discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on first reading. That's unanimous.
Is there a desire for me to do all three readings?
I think if you move it, we can determine, but if you don't want to move it, you don't have to move it.
I do not believe we have unanimous anyway, so.
We need unanimous for 3 readings. We don't need it. We can give second reading without unanimous consent.
Okay. I will do that. I move that council give second reading to Bylaw 4779, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat, to authorize council to impose a property tax for the year 2023 and to exempt certain property from taxation for the year 2023.
I will second that.
Is there a discussion on second reading of the bylaw? Councillor Hirsch.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just kind of crunching numbers a little bit, and I do have a bit of a challenge that I'm looking at when I think about, you know, we talk about small businesses, kind of the anchor of the community, and that is our kind of non-res impact. So when I look at option 2, the numbers are $84 for single family, $281 for multi, and minus $287 for the non-res. Then I look at 4B, which means if we choose that option, it's a $10 decrease for single family. It'd be net zero, so $281 for the multifamily and an $86 payment for the non-res. But the net difference to the non-res to the two is $373. And when I think about small business being able to kind of look at whatever they can to get things going again, the net cost really is $10 to the single family homes, which is the comparison. Hopefully my math is right on 2 to 4B. So I'm just kind of wondering out loud, I think we talk about embracing and supporting our small businesses, and for $10, which is less than not even $1 a month, I think we all would probably be feeling comfortable to say, you know what, I can withstand that to support the small business in our community, when they're in essence paying a tab of $373. So I appreciate all the efforts that goes into this, I really do, and it's kind of your job to kind of do well, we think we could kind of do this, and I appreciate that, and that's why it's the beauty of having a good discussion over this. And I'm probably not going to support 4B and probably support scenario 2, just with that. So if I'm wrong on the math, please let me know, but I just wanted to make sure we're on the right page. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Hirsch, I believe your math is correct. I do want to highlight, though, the difference between scenario 1, 2, and 3 and 4A and B. So scenario 1 to 3 looks at allocating the current budget, so the $84.8 million. Scenario 4A and B takes into consideration the additional growth. So what that is looking at is increasing the 2023 tax revenue budget, either taking the total amount that we did not budget for or that we did not include in our budget and adding that into our budget, or taking a portion of that and adding that into our budget. So that's the difference between the two slides here.
So then it just leads me to my question then, do we need the extra revenue? Right?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Hirsch. So currently in the 2023 budget, we have a deficit of $11 million that we are funding through reserves. So bringing in this additional revenue would lessen that requirement on the reserves. And again, if we don't need all of the $11 million from the reserves, this would just go back into the reserves.
Yeah, no, so I get it. Thanks for sewing that together, because I think it's important for the general taxpayer to understand that we're $11 million short on our budget as far as getting it, and we always, I mean, we have been in the past. It used to be a bigger delta, so I'm happy to report that. And the word financially fit is not used as much anymore around here, so that's a good thing. But I guess it's just important for us to kind of sew this together and understand the impact of that. But I appreciate the commentary, and it is one of those things of how do you adjust, right? So anyway, I appreciate the commentary. Thanks.
Councillor McGrogan.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I just want to say that I'm not saying I don't support it, but I think some reflection on this would be in order, feedback from the community through however that happens. And so I would prefer not to, I'm not going to support a second reading. Because I want some time, the third reading, I'm sorry, because I just want to spend some time just to give this some sober thought.
Councillor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark, through the chair. Just based on the comprehension and solidification that came from Councillor Hirsch, is it possible to just get a super simple briefing note with like this dissolved down to this is the consequence of scenario A, this is the consequence of scenario B, this is what it would look like with our budget for 2024 if we don't include the revised tax revenue in our budget this year? Like, what would the deficit look like next year if we include it? What would the deficit look like next year if we don't? How would it impact? Is that a practical request, or is that something that we should be dissolving on our own or figuring out on our own?
Yeah, the scenarios here provide the additional impact to the taxpayers. So the second last column will show that impact or that additional tax increase to the taxpayer. The difference between the budget is in scenario 1 to 3 is going to, your tax revenue is going to stay the same at 84.8 million. With the additional revenue coming in, again, if you're looking at 4B, that would increase that, I think it's 85.3 million, so increasing it by 508,000 to the tax revenue budget. So again, we wouldn't use the entire 11 million. Part of that 500,000 then would go to help support that gap on the municipal side. Hopefully that provides some additional clarification for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Robbins?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I'm looking at single-family, multifamily, and non-residential, and each of them has a consequence to the tax rates. And so I guess what I'm seeing is we had 4% in mind, and so it's going to be lower regardless, but it affects everyone in a different way. So in a single family, your assessment's gone up, but your tax rate might have gone down a little bit, but it doesn't matter because you're still going to be paying a little bit more anyway. And then if you're a renter and your landlord's taxes go up and the assessment goes up, that's going to come back to you. And then a non-residential, you have, we're trying to encourage business. So I'm stuck on, so we can't win. If it's under 4%, we win, because that's what we said was our maximum. So we're trying to get that down, but how to distribute it is the thing, obviously, you're looking for directions on. I'm not comfortable with excess revenue, frankly, in 4A and 4B, because I think when we voted for what the highest tax rate, it was based on, we wouldn't have excess out of that. We would be taxing at our budgeted rate and not collecting extra. So I'm not comfortable 4A and 4B because there's an excess revenue, and I appreciate there's lots more to consider, and we do have a deficit. I get all of that, but that's not what we told people we were going to do. So I would like to look at one of the other scenarios. And what I'm curious about, and I don't quite understand, again, back to Unit 17, is how much of the growth of Unit 17 was in that non-residential? Because I like the idea of shifting the benefits to non-residential where there's been a lot of growth there. And so to give them the benefit of the growth by reducing the tax on it makes a lot of sense to me. But how much of that was Unit 17 versus something else? If I could have that breakdown, that would help me assess scenario 1, 2, or 3. Because in my mind, I've eliminated 4A and B. Someone could persuade me otherwise, but.
I do have that number for Unit 17, just one moment. So the assessment valuation increased 22 million for Unit 17.
And so what was the assessment of all of the other new non-residential?
I'm just going to go, if I can move backwards. So the total assessment growth of 142 million, of that 22 million was to Unit 17.
So lots of other growth beyond what we were doing?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up on Councillor Robbins's comments, I always feel quite uncomfortable in these deliberations because I don't feel like we have information about what the economic impact or social impact are of each of these scenarios. Everybody lives somewhere. Not everybody owns a business, but everybody lives somewhere. So presumably there's some benefit to business in having lower residential and multifamily. I don't know, I would like to know what the social and economic impact of each of the scenarios are. With the multifamily especially, we don't really seem to, I know previous council deliberated on it somewhat, but why we don't look at what the potential economic and social impact is of an increase or decrease to those rates. I noticed that scenario 3, the total tax impact is less in that scenario for multifamily, and also in scenario 1, they get a bit of a benefit, as do non-residential, and the single family is still at $85. So I don't feel comfortable enough at this point I definitely won't agree to third reading without further contemplation of these issues that have come up. And I don't know that I'm 100% opposed to the excess revenue, but I need to understand that better. Like it just means we'll be borrowing less, but would like to understand that better. City Manager Mitchell.
Through the chair, just for clarity's sake, I can understand the economic impact, but how are we defining the social impact? If we're going to bring information back to council, what specifically would define how you're asking for economic and social impact on our residents, but what specifically defines the social impact?
Well, I'm sure someone a lot smarter than me has thought about that, and I'm sure there's research out there. But for example, affordable, like we all know that there's affordable housing crunch in our city and across the country. Obviously, there's no guarantee that a landlord will pass on any reductions to their tenants, but they almost certainly will pass on increases to their tenants. I'm not sure there's any way to enforce that. And probably sounds like I'm stating an opinion. I just want to have all the information before we I want to understand truly I see what the dollar figure is, but how does that affect our community overall? Or how do the ratios tend to affect communities in terms of economic growth and social indicators such as affordability of housing? Anyone else? Okay. And I guess it may totally be that scenario 4 is, or any of the scenarios are the best one, but I just look forward to more information. Okay, seeing no further speakers, we will vote on second reading. Yeah. Yes. Or correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's correct. The recommendation is for 4B.
And if we vote this down, what happens? If we vote yes, if we approve it, we can always go to third reading and not approve that. But what happens at this stage if we reject?
Through the chair, I think we have enough information to understand right now what council is requesting for more information. So if it's voted down, we will bring it back to the May 1st, and hopefully then council will have enough information to make a decision on second and third with a different bylaw.
Okay, so don't you have enough information even if we vote yes, that, I'm struggling to, City Clerk and then Councillor Sharps.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. So council's options at second reading would be to defeat second reading, which would require administration then to bring forward a new bylaw starting over at first reading, or postpone second reading to the next council meeting if you would like to direct administration to bring back more information or make adjustments to the current bylaw, or pass second reading.
Councillor Sharps?
Based on that information, would I be able to table the second reading and direct administration to come back with further scenarios?
You could withdraw your motion for second meeting?
I understand. I will withdraw. I would like to withdraw my reading then, and give administration the opportunity to come back with scenarios 5 and 6, or whatever.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table so the motion is withdrawn, and we have another.
Thank you, through the chair. So we would require general consent from council to have that motion withdrawn. So I would ask Mayor Clark to ask council if anyone is opposed to that.
Is anyone opposed to Councillor Sharps withdrawing her motion? Seeing no opposition, Councillor Sharps has made a motion to direct city manager to come back with additional information as requested by council at the May 1st meeting. Can I get a seconder for that?
Second.
All right, so we'll vote on that motion. All right, the motion is passed. Procedurally, we have a few other items of business arising, including adopting the Education Cypress View Foundation and designated industrial property requisitions, and amending the tax revenue budget. I assume that those are necessarily postponed as a result of withdrawing second reading.
Yes, Mayor Clark, those should all be together, and so we'll bring them back at the next meeting.
Okay, cool, thank you. All right, item 11.2 is Bylaw 4780, 2023 Supplementary Property Tax Bylaw. The sponsor is Corporate Services. Is this impacted by the previous withdrawal?
So Mayor Clark, through the chair, this one is linked to the previous one, property tax. This one will mirror the property taxes. This will have to be approved once we have clarity on the other one. So this could be deferred as well and brought forward back on May the 1st, and that'll have to be approved by council as well.
Thank you. So item 11.2 is postponed till May 1st. Moving on to item 12.1, Audit Committee. We have the meeting minutes from April 4th, 2023.
So, Your Worship, I move that council adopts the minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on April 4th as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, We'll vote. Go ahead, Counselor Robbins.
Sorry, I apologize. I just had a question of the Chief Financial Officer's report on page 184 of the council package for Managing Director Eggert or City Manager Mitchell, whoever wants to answer it. If the answer's not here today, I'm 100% fine with that. So my only question was, there's a pie chart on the right-hand side, capital funding sources, and it shows grants at 32%. And all I wanted to know is that 32% above or below the average for the City of Medicine Hat?
Through the chair, and I see Lola Barda's coming down. Every year that's different. Overall, our grant programs are funded, the majority through the MSI program, the Municipal Sustainability Initiative, which has been quite constant over the last few years. That's one of the grant programs that's going to be redesignated and reduced into the future. And we'll look if you have any further information to that, Lola.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Robbins, it's pretty much consistent with prior years because of the comments by Managing Director Eggert.
So the bulk of that 30% is the MSI?
It's
whatever they call it now, they've
yeah,
changed it. But
that is the largest piece of what we normally receive on a yearly basis. There is other grants included in that. I'd have to look at the breakdown as to what portion comes from each area.
Sure, okay, thank you very much.
All right, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on Councillor Hirsch's motion. That's unanimous. Councillor Hirsch, as Chair of the Audit Committee, do you have any meeting highlights you would like to share?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, it's rather always a lengthy meeting, and there's a lot of information to digest, and I apologize in advance, always in the package that you get. That being said, obviously, the finance of City Medicine Hat is obviously a very foundational piece of information, and I think it's important for us to all understand. One of the things too that in the course of an audit, we get actually asked in terms of really by an auditor, quite frankly, is if there's any concerns that we have raised, any issues that we are aware of, and quite frankly, every year we seem to be on top of things, and I appreciate that. One of the things that, again, you'll see going forward is, again, credit to the staff that we were the Triple Crown winner, and I presume Your Worship will move through that again and have a bit of a presentation, so congratulations for that effort. I guess what that means to the community is that you can rest assured in terms of our ability to make sure we're documenting and keeping accounting has been at a very high threshold. And the funny thing is, for every year they win these awards, it's actually a natural bar that they want to maintain. And obviously, it's a bit of an incentive for them to keep that high quality of work. So for that perspective, and then obviously, Your Worship, you're going to see the next conversation in regards to the maintenance and the continuation of our accounting firm, and that's to come. So we had a dialogue over that as well. So. But overall, good meeting, and I'm happy to see that we do a good job in terms of making sure that we stay on top of things that could prove to be a bit of a challenge in terms of processes and procedures. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hirsch. Item 12.1.3 is the 2022 City of Medicine Hat financial statements.
So through that, Your Worship, I move that Council approves the 2022 City of Medicine Hat financial statements.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous. Item 12.1.4, reappointment of KPMG Limited, or sorry, LLP as external auditors for 2023.
So thank you, Your Worship. I move the council approves the reappointment of KPMG for the City of Medicine Hat annual audit engagement for the 2023 financial statements.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on reappointing KPMG as external auditors for 2023? Seeing none, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous. There are several items for information, one of which is the Government Finance Officers Association Awards that Councillor Hirsch mentioned. Moving on to item 12.2, Energy and Infrastructure Committee. We have a 12.2.1 meeting minutes of April 6, 2023.
I move that council adopts the minutes of the Energy and Infrastructure Committee meeting held on April 6th, 2023, as presented for the corporate record.
Second.
Any errors or omissions? Comments? Seeing none, we'll vote on the motion. Councillor Van Dyke, as Chair of Energy and Infrastructure, do you have any highlights to report?
In the interest of time, no. I will move on to the next item if that's okay.
Thank you. 12.2.3, Medicine Hat Police Service Alert Office Expansion.
I move that council approves an increase of $130,000 to the City Operations Building Services 2023 Capital Infrastructure Repair Program budget from $2,250,000 to $2,380,000 with the increased funding provided by the alert to facilitate the expansion of their office space at the Medicine Hat Police Service.
Seconder?
I will second.
Sorry.
No, all good. Councillor McGrogan.
Yeah, I just had a question in regards to this. So is this an ongoing work that's over budget, or is this a new expenditure? I'm not sure. I couldn't tell from the briefing note.
I think the city manager can jump in.
I'm going to refer to Managing Director Maines.
Managing Director Maines.
Thank you, Your Worship. This, and to Councillor McGrogan through the chair, this represents additional funding that became available to police services for incremental work to be done in regards to the alert initiative and the office space. There was some budgeted funds that were approved in the 23-24 budget. This is incremental to that, so it's more money that showed up available for that group, and we're matching our portion of it there. So it's not over budget. The work was already underway, and this is additional funds that became available through a grant initiative.
If I can follow up through the chair. Thank you. So we had a project to renovate a piece of space at the police station. Through it all, I guess we ran short. Is that right? Is that kind of, unless I'm not hearing this right, I'm going to just get right to my point on this. This seems to me it's $130,000. Usually in my old life, what you would do is you would wait till year end and look at what your variance was, and if you needed to come back for money at that time, you would. And I'm just wondering why this might be different.
Through the chair again to Councillor McGrogan, this is new money for an increase to the previous program. It was on budget and on time, it's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous. Moving on to item 12.2.4, City Operations Building Services Capital Budget Amendment Enabling Accessibility Grant Funding.
I move that council approves an increase of $52,311 to the City Operations Building Services 2023 Capital Infrastructure Repair Program budget from $2,380,000 to $2,432,311 with the increased funding provided by Enabling Accessibility Grant to facilitate the replacement of the Kiwanis Center at Elizabeth Street School accessibility ramp.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous. Moving on to Public Services Committee meeting minutes dated April 11th, 2023.
I move the council adopts the minutes of the Public Services Committee meeting held on April 11th, 2023, as presented for the public record.
I'll second that.
Discussion. Seeing none, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous. Councillor Robbins, do you have any meeting highlights?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. We had a presentation, in case anyone is interested. The slide deck is within the package at page 527 or so, and it just described the different events, guest experiences, entertainment, arts, culture that have taken place in various city facilities. So it was interesting to see the budget and all of those things. A lot of people have questions about the Esplanade and Co-op Place, and so we received some of that information, and I thought I would highlight it here.
Councillor Canodal?
Never mind. This is a section, I'm looking ahead to 12.3.3, but we are currently not there yet. So I will retract my.
Okay, well, we're there now. 12.3.3, or, yep, include Community Inclusion Coordinator.
So I'm going to make a motion about this, but I do have some background information from the committee's perspective that might be helpful to council. So I'll make the motion and then ask to speak to sort of give that information as well. So I move that council approves a budget amendment to the amount of $133,170 funded from reserves as presented to support hiring of a community inclusion coordinator with a focus on training, programming, consultation, and relationship building, as well as to provide advice and guidance on cultural matters.
Second.
Councillor Robbins?
I put in my request to speak. So I'm sure all of you will remember, but I'll just highlight it for the sake of the record. When we did the budget, had our budget deliberations, staff was still in the process of developing this role and a number of other things to do with our Truth and Reconciliation response. So we did hear from the then managing director, I think twice at council, that there would be a budget amendment coming. So that's what this is. So sort of foreshadowed, I guess, from before. I just wanted to let all of council know that the committee did roll this around over a couple of meetings to work out how, because of the discussion originally at council is how is this position going to be different? Why should it be full-time? What will the person be doing? And so there was some discussion at a meeting 2 meetings ago, and then the last meeting to get to the briefing note that you see before you today that addressed some of those specific questions and concerns that various councillors had. So that's all. I won't repeat the briefing note. It's all contained within the briefing note. And it also did something else which we had, again, asked staff to do, and they did an excellent job in this briefing note, in my opinion, is differentiate between the current community inclusion coordinator and the new role and what the differences are. The current inclusion coordinator focuses more on accessibility, and as our population ages, that's going to continue to be a full-time responsibility. And so there's a lot of discussion of what the community inclusion coordinator on the cultural, Indigenous relationship side and why it's different, and why both of them would be full-time jobs. So that's contained all within the briefing note, but I thought I should highlight it as it had come up here for discussion. And then our managing director at the time, did let us know that this would be forthcoming. If the committee says I've stated any of that wrong, or Managing Director Stout wants to say anything different, please feel free. I thought I would just sort of preface that all a little bit for everybody.
Councillor Hirsch?
Well, and we had chatted about this prior, and I guess I want to separate what the activities of the job is to the fact that it's just another, it's another added position. So I did read the briefing note. It does, I guess my first question is, have we considered this as a contracted position first? Because I do note that there's activities on there that would be considered the establishment of, the development of, which is, in my mind, in some cases, one-off activities. So once those are completed, do we feel, and I know the rest of the story, I read it in the fact that there's gonna be, and support the municipality's response to the TNR, and I get it. I guess I'm just wondering, was there discussion about this perhaps being contracted first, which we could always convert right into full-time? I'm just sensitive when we add on all the time. So again, I'm not talking about the activities. I want to make that clear. I'm in support of that. I'm always one to kind of talk about, can the activities be done in a contracted manner, services rendered, and then we kind of move on. Question.
Managing Director Stouth.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the chair to Councillor Hirsch. Yes, there was a tremendous amount of discussion on this position as to whether it could be a part-time position, a contracted position. At the end of the day, we took a look at this and said, there are 15 recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Recommendation Committee. And some of those have certainly ongoing impacts in the city. This can't be viewed as a project. We are either going to make the step and move into responding to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and the subsequent recommendations from our own ad hoc committee, or we're not. And the position is not something that we can function with off the corner of someone's desk. We've got our staff, we have our staff loaded in their workload and responsibilities now. So we had a lot of discussion about this. We feel that the existing community inclusion coordinator's workload is going to increase going into the future. We do anticipate there's a bit of not a bit, there's an opportunity for increase in depth from the second community inclusion coordinator to handle some of the increasing workload on the existing roles, responsibilities as time goes on. So that's a long answer, but to cut it succinct, we took a real hard look at it. And our recommendation is to hire the position and move into addressing the recommendations and further cultural issues. I want to stress too that Indigenous is not the only cultural group that we would deal with, or that this position would have contact with and assist. So immigrants, new Canadians into our city will all have contact through this. I hope that answered your question.
Councillor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. Through the chair, there's a couple points I wanted to share in regards to this position. The first is that these, I said this in our public services meeting, these positions, currently we've got one and then others that function in a similar capacity, are very public facing and are at risk of burnout if they don't have the resources required to accomplish what is required of their role. So I think it's really important to remember that the work that's done by a community inclusion coordinator, any sort of community-oriented position, has the risk of burnout. So if we are trying to accomplish something like Managing Director Stowe said off the side of someone's desk, it's we're putting that position at risk of overwhelm. The second thing is that there was a study of left-handedness at one point in time, and there's also a comparison that's been made with the LGBTQ community or any community that is seen to be, I don't know, disregarded or not like the public aren't as comfortable with. But as we've observed this in the public school division, the more open and accommodating we are to the Indigenous students and more resources are available to them, more of them come out of the woodwork as identifying as being Indigenous and seek support for what they've gone through and what they need. So without having the supports in place, we can't necessarily, we can't help these people. So we have to, I think it's important to, we've been asked by, through the 94 calls to action in, that we need to do work, and we can't do the work without people in place.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you. Through the chair, I shared Councillor Hirsch's concerns, and I just wanted to bring up a few things. I have a few questions, sorry. I'm not going to diatribe here. So I'm looking at the position. We have community supports team, which is community development. There's a manager, 3 resource workers, an existing community inclusion coordinator whose significant focus on accessibility inclusion for people with disabilities. And so then this one is community inclusion coordinator with focuses on culture and Indigenous. So I'm going to say exactly what I said the first time this came around, and I still haven't received a response, is have we thought of partnering with the College of Medicine Hat Police to see if we can do this as a community approach, not just a city of Medicine Hat approach? Because I know in conversations that I've had with our partners, they all thought that was maybe something they'd like instead of hiring their own coordinator and we hiring our own. And I 100% agree that it's not about the details of the job, but it is about what's best for how we tap into this. And my second thing is, when I'm reading this, I'm going, okay, so one community inclusion coordinator just works on accessibility on disabilities, and the other one just works on cultural, but we also have huge resources in our community, such as Samus immigration. So are we duplicitous in our efforts? I just want to make sure that this is not taking away something that the community already offers, just like I don't think the city should ever be in business against any of our local business partners. I don't think we need to compete with any of our social providers. So I mean, there's stuff I do in immigration that I don't touch what those guys do because they are way better at it. So I stick in my little corner, and then if I need them, which I do all the time, I use them as a resource. I don't compete in an open market business against the government-funded role. So just, again, going back to, I want people to really envelop and open their arms around the calls to action, but I think the community also gets frustrated when they see an entire position that we still don't know what it is that they're doing. So they're doing cultural and Indigenous. I mean, that's a pretty wide berth of experience that we're asking for. So I'm still confused on what we're looking for.
All right. Councillor Robbins, you're next on the agenda. Managing Director Stout or City Manager Mitchell, do you have any responses to that?
Yes, through the chair, I just wanted to ask Managing Director Stout if that question about the joint work with different organizations or associations, was that considered when we were looking at this position?
Yes, it was through the chair. Yes, it was considered. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is we have different organizations, such as the college that was used for an example, with a busy Indigenous Relations Department working with Indigenous students and Indigenous education. We didn't enter into formal discussions with them regarding our work because we thought it would be unfair to ask the college, Medicine Hat College, to do our work. So we've had 15 recommendations that have come from an ad hoc committee endorsed by this council that we've been asked to deliver on, and that takes a person to do it. So for us to ask another organization to partner or share when they're loaded I just don't understand the logic behind that. So, no, we didn't have formal conversations with the college.
Councillor Sharps, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, so that was the direction, so I guess my expectation is that the direction was actually done. Whether the answer was a big fat no or not is fine, but the reason I keep bringing this up is because I have had conversations and they're very much interested in having a conversation. So, again, maybe once the conversation starts, they'll change their mind, but yeah, I guess I'm a little frustrated that if we made that decision as a council to have that conversation, why aren't we?
City Manager Mitchell.
I think there's a challenge for my role and Managing Director Stouth's role just because we are coming in the middle of the proposal, request, whatever. So if this is something that council would like, we could take it back and have a conversation. I do agree with Councillor Sharps in respect to duplication of services, and we have to be careful as a council what kind of services we are going to provide. I think the committee did have some great discussion around the position, trying to be mindful of council's decision and direction, but I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and do some more research to see if we met the targets that council were asking us to, because I stepped in the middle, as did Managing Director Stouth. So.
Managing Director Stouth? Yeah.
I do want to say that I did look back through the council minutes on this subject, and I don't know that I can find direction where we were asked to engage with Medicine Hat College or anyone else. So if someone has that information duly recorded, pardon me for missing it, but I did look for it. And so, well, I think at this point, I'm going to just leave my comment at that unless there's further questions.
Councillor Robbins?
Yes, thank you. Just two quick things. I don't mean to, and I'm not repeating anything I said before. I said I wouldn't earlier, and I'm not going to. So I will say that at the Truth and Reconciliation Recommendations Committee, both the college representative, their Indigenous liaison expert, and SD76s were here to help the city form the recommendations and work with the larger group. Both of those gentlemen took time out of their, what they've described as very busy work, to be able to come and work on the recommendations. Part of this role is going to be rolling out training with human resources for city employees. That's not something that you partner on very effectively. Plus, they're both very busy. They said that several times, but they were very great. We were grateful they were here, and they were grateful to be here and share the experience. And the other thing I want to say to Councillor Hirsch, we did have some discussion before the Managing Director Stouth and before City Manager Mitchell, which is why I bring it up, about whether you could really find someone who would take this work on a contract, and how difficult it would be to recruit into a contract as opposed to a full-time job. So we did have some discussion of that at committee and with Managing Director as well. So just to confirm, it was discussed.
Councillor Knodel?
I'll be quick. I think there's aspects of this role that couldn't be done with a community organization, including things like repatriation of remains. There's a complexity to it that requires access to municipal services. I find that trying to, in my opinion, I don't feel like it's smart to turn this into a shared task. I think that there's reason for needing a full position around this. I've seen it in other organizations, and it's very effective.
All right, seeing no, oh, Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I just wanted to make a quick comment on staffing in this role in other major organizations in our community. So Medicine Hat College has 2 full-time employees in similar roles. The public school district has 3 and the Catholic school district has 1.
All right, seeing no further speakers, we will vote on the motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through the chair, I also just want to just remind council that we are following direction from the November 7th council meeting where there was a motion passed to onboard and recruit, and that's what we're following up on. And and we've given the subject, due consideration and due diligence. Thank you.
All right, we'll vote. And that passes. There are a few items for information on public services. With respect to the Community Vibrancy Advisory Board, there were a number of items of interest. I would maybe like in the future to see more, if the documentation could be attached and a little bit more information provided in terms of the minutes so that council can be informed about what's going on. Item 12.4, Municipal Planning Commission, 12.4.1, meeting minutes, April 12th, 2023, for information. Are there meeting highlights that you would like to share, Councillor Hirsch?
Just in lieu of time, and a lot of the bylaws flow to council, so.
Thank you. Item 12.4.4, Bylaw 4778.
So, Your Worship, at this time, I move that council gives first reading to Bylaw 4778, a bylaw of City of Medicine Hat to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from medium-density residential district to community services district.
Second.
And we'll vote on first reading. That's passed. The public hearing will occur on May 1st, 2023. Item 12.4.5, Bylaw 4784.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council gives first reading to Bylaw 4784, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from medium-density residential district to low-density residential district.
And we'll, so Councillor McGrogan has seconded, and we'll vote on first reading. That passes. We have one information item at 12.4.6, and seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned.